But what does everybody think? Any interest in that?
You can put us down for 2. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and the lineup tonight is as good as any we've ever had. So why the heck shouldn't I be overjoyed at it?
And it's Christmas.
Yeah, and it was your last day for the visitor centre.
Yeah, it's me officially off the clock for 2 weeks, so anything goes tonight. This is. I was concerned by the fact that when I came in, it said I was being recorded. So I'll behave myself for the first few drams.
Oh, it's all right. No one ever watches the YouTube recordings anyway. Hiya, Bobby. Hiya, Chris.
Evening, all.
Hiya, Matt.
Hi, mate.
You all well?
All
Yes.
good, yes. Thanks.
Good. Excellent, eh? Well, we're joined by Iain Allen from Glen Moray tonight as well. Was Emma joining as well, Iain? Do you know, or?
She's going to pop in at some point if she can get a chance. She's got the wee one to put to bed, so I think it depends on the temperament or the desire for the wee one to go to sleep. So we look at our wee boy Lucas.
No worries. I think
But she'll make an appearance, I think.
Lorraine usually has the same problem with me most nights, so.
After 6 drams, she'll have no problem getting you to bed tonight.
I'll just leave him here on the sofa, Iain.
You'll get some peace and quiet for a change.
Hiya, Henry. Hi, Iain. The other Iain. Are you the first Iain, or do we give Iain Allen the first Iain space?
I think so.
Second Iain?
Actually, who's the oldest? Who's first on the chart?
Oh, we're not going to do that, are we? We're not going to have fisticuffs already.
We'll wait till the 5th or 6th dram before we get into that.
Hiya, Dave. You well?
Evening.
How's Isla?
Beautiful, mate. Thank you.
Yeah, lucky duck. Hiya,
How was
Steve.
Tokyo, Iain?
Sorry?
How was Tokyo, Iain?
Tokyo was amazing. It's been highlight of the year. Apart from this, obviously, but Tokyo stood out.
The highlight so far, Iain, is that what you're
Highlight
saying?
so far, yes. You're gonna have to go somewhere to beat Tokyo.
Iain was saying it was seeing me again a couple of weeks ago. I'm very disappointed. Everything keeps changing around.
Well, you did bring whiskey with you, which is a rarity. Not many people do that. So you were up
There you
there.
go, see?
So it's like taking coal to Newcastle, isn't it? Is it? I mean, hi, Jürgen, by the way.
Hi, Carl.
You well?
I'm well. How are you?
Aye, canny.
Good.
And there's Stuart as well. So I know we've had a few cry-offs tonight, and it is just gone 5:30, but if it's all right, we'll just give a couple more minutes for the stragglers to join. Stuart, are you well?
Jürgen's how...
Oh, sorry.
Evening.
Hiya, John.
I was just going to ask Jürgen how the new place is.
I've been spending most of my day in the loft, Dave. So rewiring the whole place, getting lamps up,
mate.
and yeah. So we're knocking through some walls. So between Christmas, New Year,
Oh,
A quiet time then for you.
it is a quiet time indeed. So I'm looking forward to tonight.
Oh, good. Well, we as you all know, tonight is the NEWAS kind of Christmas party. If you're interested, after we've done the lineup, I do have a Christmas quiz. If you're interested, I think I might even throw in a nice prize for the highest score.
Can we ban Stuart Munro this year, because he's a bit of a Christmas quiz aficionado, if I remember.
That is a good point. I seem to recall Stuart hammered the hell out of everybody the last time we did this. In fact, I'm sure he was seeing all of the answers online or something. We'll see. Anyway, thanks very much for joining us. I know things are a bit compressed for those that are in the secret sample swap. We're doing another one of these kind of things tomorrow evening. And I appreciate my timing isn't wonderful. But it's much appreciated that you're all joining tonight. And well, I don't know about you guys, but we've got one hell of a lineup, haven't we? Thank you very much, Iain and Emma, for sorting this out at such tight time frames, especially given that one of the drams tonight is a preview of the Warehouse 1 releases. So I believe, Iain, is this the first time that you're sharing this with the mere mortals out there?
Not quite. We did a Twitter tasting last week with them. So some people may, I see one face on this screen that has definitely tried before on the Twitter tasting. So I don't know if any of you were on that. But yeah, we managed to sneak it out just before.
All right. Okay. Well, for most of us anyway, most mere mortals, this will be a chance to try that before most people in the world have tried it. So that's something exciting. And that's dram number 6. But Iain and I kind of made a guess as to what the order of play might be. So let's find
out what we're changing.
Here it comes.
So tonight, obviously, yeah. So it's the Christmas party, and Iain. It's almost kind of like a mini tradition. Is this the second or third Christmas bash that we've had where you've joined us and shared some lovely drams with us?
Definitely the second, possibly the third. Yeah, I think we could be on to the third year.
Yeah. And
honorary member, aren't you?
He's a fellow. Iain is a fellow of NEWAS. Yeah. Actually, on that note, we haven't actually had a new fellow added to the to NEWAS for quite some time, and I'd been thinking on this subject. Hiya, Peter. Hiya, Neil. But we'll cover that at some other time, not tonight, as I believe we're all parched and might want the first dram in the glass. So the first one that I'd sort of picked out was the Elgin limited edition. No. Okay, so straight away I've knocked that up. Is it the Phoenix Rising?
Let's go there first.
Okay, so number 2 sample is the first sample. That's a good start.
I was just going to change it anyway, regardless of what you said, even if you got it right. But no, I think with Phoenix Rising, a couple of reasons. One, it's a lot lighter as a spirit. It's and I mean that from a flavor perspective, as well as strength. So I think it's a nice little starter for the evening. Assuming that this is your first dram of the evening, some of you might have been Christmas partying it already and on to dram number 6 or 7. I don't know.
That sounds like banana.
So hands up for anybody who's already preloaded before tonight's event. Come on, we want to see some hands here. No, everybody's on a fresh palate. Flipping heck.
Look, I made it with a 4-week old.
Well, yes. Well done, mate. Well done.
I loaded up with a pork pie. Does that count?
Well, that's definitely not a clean palate then.
Yeah, I wouldn't describe chicken curry as a clean palate either. What's the first one?
So the first dram is the Phoenix Rising, and it's sample number 2. So apologies, I got that the wrong way round. I made a guess, and yeah, in typical NEWAS style, I've got the lineup slightly order slightly wrong. So sample number 2 on your bottles.
And we're assuming it's the right liquid in the right bottles as well. That could be.
Don't say things like that. Yeah. Oh, come on, I'm allowed one complete foul up a year.
Yeah, it's expected. You're not allowed, it's expected. Okay, so are we good to go?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, probably like to say hello to everybody. It's good to see you all back on screen. It's actually been great the last year. I think we've seen quite a few of you at the distillery. There's more than 1 or 2 faces as I glance across the screens that have ventured this far up north. We've even managed to lift Steve's restraining order from standing at the top of the hill shouting Chenin Blanc casks are shit. But he's now allowed in. And as I said earlier, you know, Dave bringing whiskey, that should be encouraged. That is definitely encouraged. He's getting brownie bonus points for that. And he's just an all-round general nice guy as well. So that's also good. But the rest of you those who haven't been up, we're closed for the next 2 weeks, but we'll see you in 2024. So come and see us. But we'll get started with the first dram because I know that's what you're here for. That's what you want to try. Phoenix Rising. We've had 2 new launches this year. Now I've kind of been talking quite a bit in social media just how good a year it's been for Glen Moray. We've had some amazing launches, amazing releases, amazing events. It's just been one of those good years, all round great years. And Phoenix Rising is definitely a part of that. It's us doing things that we've been doing for years, but kind of sexing up the packaging a little bit, if that's the right phrase for it. We were always quite buttoned up with our approach to packaging. We've done some kind of cool stuff, and Phoenix Rising is definitely a part of that. Has anybody tried this one before? Anybody seen it out and about? Nope. It's pretty new out. It's been out. It came out, I think. Don't quote me on this. I've not really been at the distillery much recently, but it was about 2 months ago, I think we launched it. We launched Twisted Vine in the UK in the summertime, and this is part of this series. But Twisted Vine was very much focused in the UK. It was our UK launch, and we do kind of bigger launches for the UK purely because the UK is still our #1 market. And I'm talking about it's been a great year for Glen Moray. If we look at the Nielsen data for the last 6 months, Glen Moray is the #1 selling single malt in the UK. Stretch it out to the year, we're #3. So obviously the first 6 months was a little bit slower. But a lot of that drive and a lot of that push is off the back of the success of Twisted Vine, the cognac cask that we released. Phoenix Rising is the kind of European release. You can get it in the UK via Amazon. I think that is the only retailer that is holding this one. But it's a return to what we've done before, which I'm sure some of you have tried, was the fired oak, 10-year-old fired oak. So heavily charred casks, taking virgin oak, level 3 char on the cask, just kind of sweetening up the whiskey, mellowing it down a little bit, making it really kind of soft, gentle, easy sipper. And that's why I thought this was a great one to begin tonight's tasting. The reason we discontinued fired oak and returned with Phoenix Rising, the name obviously a return to something that we wanted to bring back that was successful, and that was because fired oak was kind of victim of its own success. It had an age statement. That was the problem. And you know, this is me being more honest than probably marketing want us to be, but we couldn't sustain the 10-year-old age point. It was selling too much. It was actually biting into stock for our 12-year-old, and our 12-year-old is our kind of flagship single malt. So we couldn't have it kind of affecting that stock. So we discontinued it. We've been running it down. And we kind of wanted to go back to it, wanted to revisit it because it was quite a successful whiskey. So we had a look at the age profile of the stock that we could sustain going forward. And we've come back with Phoenix Rising, which again, probably not meant to say, but it's about 6 years old. So it is kind of the kind of fired oak at a younger age point, but it works well at that age. It's meant to be a light, soft, easy drinking, sweet whiskey. And for those of you who've tried the Glen Moray New Make Spirit, it's quite a light, sweet spirit. So at that younger age point, it doesn't need the wood to kind of mask too many deficiencies. And utilizing the heavy char cask, which does 2 things. One, it kind of caramelizes the wood sugars, makes them more accessible to the spirit and brings them out in a slightly different format. It's kind of creme brulee style that it kind of adds to the whiskey. And on top of that, it basically creates a carbon filter within the casks. It's kind of creating that thicker level of char within the wood, which is filtering through during the maturation process. Takes out some of the heavier compounds. Okay, we do chill filter it ultimately anyway on this one at 40%, but it just helps to soften, sweeten, and lighten this spirit. And it suits the 40% strength point as well, because if you have it too high with the lighter flavor profile, it becomes quite a boring whiskey. So you've got this just nice, soft, super accessible whiskey. We just launched it, as I say, and it picked up the best Speyside non-age statement at the World Whiskey Awards, which is a blind tasting. I always like these ones that are blind tasted so that people are just judging it on the liquid itself. So fresh, hot off the press even, is what I'm trying to say, and picking up awards straight off the bat, which is really good to see. And this is my first tasting of Phoenix Rising, actually using my voice. Anything we've done previously has been on Twitter or online. So it's the first kind of time I kind of had a chance to talk about it and sit and pour it. So we get proper feedback from people. And like I say, none of you have had a dram tonight already, so I think this works really well. And I'm always wary. I'm aware of the fact that you guys are whiskey drinkers, and I'm aware that most of you will prefer your whiskey at a higher ABV, non-chill filtered. Probably the majority of you, not many of you, will probably reach for a 40%er. So I'm always wary bringing one out to a crowd that is knowledgeable and their approach is probably different. But I think that I was quite happy to put this one in the tasting. I had no qualms about it at all. I think it's got the character, it's got the flavor, and it's a wonderful sipping single malt whiskey. And the bottle I'm drinking actually is, I do drink my own product, is the bottle I bought for Christmas to take home with me this afternoon. So this is going to be what I'm drinking over the next few days. First dram out of it, it will look very different in about 2 or 3 days time. So,
I've just had a look on Amazon there, Iain, and I can't get it until January now.
Is it not been listed till January?
No, it's there, but I can't get it until the 9th of January.
All right, okay. So I don't know if that's because they're sold out or maybe they're holding off the launch, because I know it hasn't launched in Europe yet. We had a few events in Europe. We were pre-pouring it, tasting it for folk, but it's not available till January in Europe. So I do wonder if it's possibly the case that we've held it back until January the 9th. Oh. Thanks for doing the research. I should have maybe checked that before I jumped on.
But and Neil, you do know we have 5 more to try. I'm just saying. Okay.
I know. I've been bugging Iain about this one already because I was a big fan of the predecessor. Yeah.
Iain, do you use heavily charred bourbon casks or do you rechar them in Speyside?
I heavily charred virgin oak in the Phoenix Rising. We've got it's 2/3 virgin oak heavy char and 1/3 bourbon heavy char, which we order from Kelvin Cooperage. So whether they're being charred, I would imagine they're being charred at the Cooperage rather than prior to the bourbon usage, but I'm not 100% sure on that one, to be honest.
Any other questions at this point? What's everybody feeling about this? I mean, I think it's an interesting one because, like you say, Iain, you know, we are typically, well, I'll speak for just myself, I guess. I typically don't look to buy and have much in terms of core range at around 40% chill filtered, but I think there's a place for it, especially for your first dram of the night, or if you're just wanting to sip something while you're watching a program or whatever. But you know, it's a nice easy dram from my perspective. But I'm gonna now. What do you guys think?
It's a nice dram, very easy drinking. Good for the in-laws. Get them started before they start singing at Christmas.
The touches of obviously the charred oak, but also coal dust characters, a bit of spice on the tail. Yeah, quite pleasant.
The challenge, Carl, with 40%, it's just so easy. I mean, earthiness, sweetness, I get peppery. I do like the rest of the 40% range. Tesco's gone through them donkey years ago, and like you said, when was the last time you bought a 40% whiskey? I can't remember, but this is nice.
Yeah. Just to throw into the mix, and I know price isn't everything, but Glen Moray has held its stall with great pricing over the years, and we've continued it, I think, with the Phoenix Rising. This is going to hit the shelves at £29 a bottle.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things that's always appealed to, especially if you're first starting out in whiskey, isn't it? It's always nice to just not risk too many of your whiskey tokens on a bottle when you're just sort of starting out your journey. And that was one of the great things, that you could always pick up a bottle of Glen Moray, you know, in the supermarket, very accessible, very inexpensive, and dive in. And yeah, it's always been appreciated from that perspective.
We're going to continue this range. It's going to be a set of 3 so far, whether there'll be more to continue after that. So the third in the collection will come out probably end of the first quarter 2024, start of the second quarter. It's from a packaging and having a bit of fun perspective, it's my absolute favorite. We're releasing a Calvados cask, and it's going to be called Forbidden Fruit. We've gone down that route because obviously Glen Moray and apples has had a previous history of being forbidden and not permitted. So it's a bit of a kind of a nod and a wink to our previous apple usage within casks. Let's not name it the whiskey that shall not be named, or even the non-whiskey that shall not be named.
So shall we do the old thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down, unless anybody else had any questions or any other feedback at the minute? So for anybody who hasn't joined us, just give your indication as to what you think of the whiskey. I'm going to give that a... So I'm just... Right, John, I've spotted your sideways there. And Royston's, yeah. Okay. Neil, was yours a thumbs up there? Or Philip, we're coming to you, and Dennis as well. Simon, what was your view on that? Oh, thumb up. Okay. Well, we like to pick the outliers. So on the whole, there was more thumbs up than anything else. So I'm not necessarily going to focus on them. So I'm definitely... Philip, would you mind giving us your view? And, you know, in every whiskey, it's up to you. There's no qualms. You share what your view is.
Well, I mean, obviously, it's so different from other Glen Morays. There's not sufficient taste for me. It is incredibly light. It's the sort of thing that I would expect if, say, for instance, Morrison's or Tesco were providing their own whiskey, but haven't said where it's come from. I like Glen Moray. Probably it is the #1 distillery for me in all kinds of their range. But this simply doesn't work. Is it the 40% or is it the 6 years? I don't know. But it doesn't work for me. There's nothing wrong with it as a whiskey. If you go to say to someone, oh, well, buy that, you know, give it a go. Yeah. But I wouldn't do anything more than that.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, a lot of us aren't necessarily, we're looking for non-chill filtered whiskey as well. And, you know, so I guess on the whole, it probably doesn't fit ordinarily with what most of us are tending to buy or look for now. But yeah, understand. I hear where you're coming from. Thanks, Philip. Dennis, you were a little bit of a side on this one as well.
Yes, I mean, it's the gentleman previously said it's a nice enough whiskey, but to me, it's just lacking something, whether that's the AV or the age.
Yeah.
But it does feel a bit of a young whiskey.
Yeah. And do you, when you're starting on an evening or whatever, would you typically dive straight into something a bit bigger, or would you look for something, you know, the kind of more 40% to kind of just start your palate off, or is this something you haven't done for a while?
Recorded.
What I'm drinking at the moment is a Glen Elgin, which is 43%, and it's a 12-year-old. So that's about the closest I can get to it at the moment on that, because the rest is either 46 and above, what I've got covered.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm going to pick on somebody who definitely gave us a big thumbs up. Matt, I think you were very positive on this one. Did you?
Yeah, I like this. When it's available, I'll buy this because there's definitely a place for this. It's light, it's easy, it's really nice. I do get what other people are saying about the ABV, but there certainly is a place for a 40% whiskey, and this is very nice.
Yeah. Have you tried? Did you try the Fired Oak before? Or
yes, I've tried the Fired Oak. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like that. That was really nice.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say it's a shame I have none left to compare them side by side. Is there any left up there, Iain?
All gone. We haven't had it for a while, to be honest. I think it's been about a year since we last had it.
I held on to that bottle for so long. It was like there was dribbles in the bottom of the bottle by the time I finally gave up.
Albert, are you sharing a pick or something?
Oh.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get you to be able to see me. Presumably you can hear me okay, Carl.
We can, yes. Yeah. Hi, Albert, by the way. I didn't even spot you join the meeting there. I
was a wee bit late because I had a couple of updates sort of appeared.
No worries.
So just for that, sorry.
No worries. Well, we've started on sample number 2.
Yeah.
Because I got the order slightly wrong, so you can join in. Anybody else as well? We're on sample number 2, which is the Phoenix Rising.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Oh, good. So that was a definite thumbs up from you as well.
It was. I realised it was at that stage. I realised you couldn't see me.
No worries. Well, thanks for joining, Albert. Yeah, cheers. So, well, I don't know, Iain. What do you think of that? I mean, that's kind of some initial feedback there.
Yeah,
range.
That on the whole, generally quite positive.
Yeah.
I'm fully aware you're not going to win everybody all the time.
No.
So even the kind of constructive feedback, we get that it's a younger whiskey, but kind of fits our range nicely at that younger age. And at that price point, I think personally, I think it's a winner.
Yeah. Well, there was more thumbs up than anything else, so not a bad start, Iain.
We'll take
we haven't thrown you out yet.
No, yeah. Well, I'm trying to think. Have I taken a 40%er to any one of our tastings before? I think this could be the first time I was brave enough to do it. So.
Oh no, we did. We had. If you remember, we did a tasting with some of the core range that included like the 18-year-old, and that's a 40%. I know it's an 18-year-old.
No, our 18 is 47.
Is it 47?
Yeah, our 18 is 47 non-chill filtered. Yep.
Yeah. So, okay.
Those kind of drams, I know is kind of meat and drink to you guys. So taking a 40% is not something I generally would take to this kind of tasting, but I'm confident of this one. I'm pleased with the way it's come out. Quite happy with it. And it was going to be between this one or Twisted Vine. But Twisted Vine had been out for a while, and I thought it gives me a chance to talk about whiskey. To be honest, I've not had much a chance to talk about because it is pretty hot off the press as well. So, and also the fact that a few of you or none of you will have tried it before. I thought maybe it might have hit the shelves. So certainly we've got it at the distillery. I'm trying to think, was it there when you were up, Dave? He's lost the screen. He might be gone. He was the most recent visitor we had. So.
Yeah. I don't. It certainly wasn't there when we visited in November.
No, it was later than that.
Yeah.
I enjoy the Twisted Vine. I bought yesterday. I bought probably my 4th bottle since it's been released.
Wow.
Twisted Vine is great. Twisted Vine has been a huge success for us. It's fully matured in cognac. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of us in the business that would have loved to have seen that one come out at 46 because that would have just brought it absolutely to life. But at 40% for a fully matured cognac, again, at £29 that you can pick up sometimes on offer for £24 in supermarkets, it's a phenomenal whiskey. It's an absolutely tremendous whiskey. So this collection with the third one, the Calvados, I've tried the Calvados, but it was about a year ago, so it's had a little bit longer in the Calvados. But as it was shaping up a year ago, it was looking really good. So watch out for that one to complete this trilogy of drams.
Good stuff. So, shall we dive into dram number 2 in the lineup, which I'm guessing has to be sample number 1. It has to be the Elgin Classic. Sorry, the Elgin. Rather
the Elgin.
Limited Edition, not Elgin Classic.
Not the Elgin Classic. It's different whiskey.
So dive in. That is your sample number 1.
Sample number 1 is dram number 2. This is how I know I'm in a NEWAS tasting. Okay, so this whiskey, it came out in December last year, but it was one of the last things we did before we closed the doors at the distillery in December 2022. So for me, I class this as a 2023 release. And for my money, this has been one of my favorite releases we've done this year stroke last year. Actually, if we are classing it as a 2022 release, we're on to dram number 1, which is dram number 2, so the one labeled 1. So if we are classing it as a 2022 release, it would be kind of closely fought between that and the Barolo Warehouse one that we did, which was one of my favorites of that year. But this one, if we are classing it as a 2023 release, it is my favorite. I really love this whiskey. It's 46%, so we're now in the non-chill filtered realms and with a higher ABV for those of you who are solely sitting in that camp. This was a bottling actually that we did. We'd planned to do as part of the Queen's Jubilee. The Queen's Jubilee was going to be, they were going to create, well, they did create a new Scottish city. So there was an application for towns to apply to be shortlisted, and then they would announce it in the summer of 2022 during the Jubilee before she sadly passed away. And Elgin was one of the towns that was shortlisted to become a city. So we thought we'd get behind the ball, given, for those of you who don't know, I'm sure most of you do, we are an Elgin-based distillery. We're in the town of Elgin. And we thought that if Elgin does get city status, we should celebrate it with a release. So we selected the liquid. The liquid almost self-selected because we wanted a liquid that was as much a part of Glen Moray as Glen Moray is a part of Elgin. And there was 2 casks that sprung to mind when we sat around the table talking about this. One obviously is bourbon. 80 to 90% of what we fill annually, depending on the year, is ex-bourbon barrels. So the spine of our team, the classic, the 12, the 18-year-old, all bourbon cask matured. That's the bulk of what we do. So there needed to be a bourbon element within there. The other one which sprung out or shouted out to us was Chardonnay. Chardonnay has become kind of synonymous with Glen Moray, or we felt it had anyway. Whether you guys out there in the whiskey drinking community think that, certainly internally we felt it was the case, because we had this spell in the 1990s where everything we did was finished in Chardonnay. Our entire range was wine mellowed, as it was called at that point. And then we introduced a 10-year-old Chardonnay in 2009. Then we introduced a Chardonnay as part of our core range with a classic finished in 2016. So in our recent history, Chardonnay has played a relatively large part in what we've done. So when we had a look at the stock profile, there was a little parcel of casks that we had, which were 10 years old. And fortunately, at that time, they were sitting exactly on 5 years bourbon, 5 years Chardonnay. So they called out to us. But that's the work that we do on the spreadsheets. So you have to then draw samples, make sure that everything's up to the standard you want it to be. And we drew a batch of these samples, and we took about a dozen cask samples from this parcel of stock that we had. And within those samples, about half of them were as dark as sherry cask. And half of them were the kind of golden color we associate with the Chardonnay cask that we typically use. So they kind of stood out. They called out. I know we do all this talk in this job, and what we tell consumers is don't judge a whiskey on its color. but we did. We thought, well, they look a little bit different. Then we nosed them, and they were Chardonnay. They had all the elements of the Chardonnay that we look for, but just with the volume turned up, they just seemed to shout a little bit louder than any of the rest. And they were crying out to be bottled. And those were the casks. We selected 5 of those casks that were bottled up to become this Elgin release. In the intervening period, we didn't get city status. It went to Dunfermline. We'd already put a social media post out there to get our social media community and the Glen Moray community to vote for their favourite packaging. So we'd had the packaging sorted. We had to change it slightly because it did mention the word city. So if you look at the bottle now, there's no mention of the word city on it because sadly we're not. Although our football club is. That go figure, can't work that one out. So anyway, we had the packaging there, we had the liquid, so we delayed it. We sat on it. We didn't know what we were going to do with it. So in October that year was the 125th anniversary. So we thought, oh damn, we haven't done anything interesting for the 125th. Let's get something. And we thought, well, we've got that sitting there waiting for us pretty much. So we decided to release it as a celebration of the 125th anniversary of Glen Moray Distillery and our town, where we're a part of, the town where I was born and brought up in. So it was quite a special bottling for me personally, as well as for the distillery. I was delighted to see it come out. And again, we went down the route of the kind of rather fun and funky, kind of slightly more contemporary approach in packaging. I had one piece of input into the packaging, and that was we must have the dandelion on the packaging. Has anybody been into Elgin and experienced the wonder that is the dandelion statue in Elgin High Street? Anyone?
No. Yeah. I know one is boarded. Is next to boarded up at the moment.
No, the back of it, the buildings beside it are. So it's kind of slightly obscured to the boardings of the building that they've got some scaffolding.
Just down from the whiskey shop.
It is, yes, just along from Gordon MacPhail.
Gordon MacPhail, that's right. Yeah.
Yep, pretty close. It's if you Google it, the first thing I think it comes up is a BBC News article declaring it as cultural vomit, I think is how they described it. So that kind of gives you a feel for what it is and what it looks like. It's a lion with a fish tail wearing a top hat and a monocle. Yeah. And apparently it was put out to tender to some artists to come up with a design for this statue, that there was some money available from the council to do something. And this artist discovered that apparently the central kind of marketplace, or the square in Elgin, for those of you who've been in the kind of area the shops are, to give another icon of Elgin where Starbucks is, if you're in wandering around about that area, that was an old fish market. And apparently back in the day, if you were at the fish market unemployed looking for a job, you wore a dandelion on your lapel. So that was the story. That was the anchor in which she kind of hooked things onto, and created the dandelion based off the back of it, and the fish tail because it was a fish market. But it looks nuts. It looks crazy. So it's on the packaging. That long story is just to tell you it's on the packaging, and it had to be there because it's cultural vomit, and who doesn't want that on their packaging? So anyway, back to the whiskey. So this is our Chardonnay cask style, but it is much bolder and richer than anything we've done in Chardonnay before. This is super sweet. It's almost like a cinnamon croissant. It's just got a lovely kind of baked bread sweetness to this whiskey, and it's amazingly drinkable. Somebody's got it there with a butter pastry. That for me is what screams out from this whiskey. It works really, really well, and it just shows that sometimes people frown on wine casks. Not looking at Steve, who just started to share screen right on cue. There it goes. There's the dandelion.
Utterly wonderful and bizarre.
Yes, there we go. That does describe it to a T. Yeah, It's quite a big statue as well. It's not the smallest of statues, but yeah. Anyway, so this whiskey, you know, is a great representation of Elgin. It's a great representation of how good wine casks can be, because a lot of people frown on them. They look down on them. They think that they're either a shortcut to flavor or they add a flavor which detracts from whiskey. Obviously, the SWA don't feel that's the case enough, or otherwise they wouldn't allow it. But you know, we have the use of these casks, and in Glen Moray, we've lent into them quite heavily. And some of the whiskies we're going to try tonight, beyond this one, is really just a kind of further development of what we started in the 1990s with Chardonnay casks. And have continued throughout in exploring different wine casks. But I always feel, and you know, we've been guilty of doing this, I'm not going to lie. Sometimes with wine casks, people just put them in for a short finish, because they can sometimes be that shortcut to flavor I mentioned. So a short finish, they can add something and develop it. When I feel that our best wine casks have come through is when we've left them to have time. We've let them sit for a number of years and allowed sometimes the wood to play as much a part in the influencing of flavor as what was incumbent of that wood before. You know, there's only so much of the wine that can seep through into the whiskey, and that's generally what will hit at first. You're then allowing the wood to play a part. And sometimes these different oaks, whether it's French oak or in the case of the Tokaij, we'll try later Hungarian oak, when you allow the oak itself to really take a hold as much as the previous usage of the cask, that's when it really does develop something interesting and different and work particularly well. What's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, dive in, guys. What are you thinking?
This one has what the other one lacked. It's got a far better robust body on it, a better mouthfeel, and to me, it's caramel, ginger, with oak spice at the end.
Yeah. The stewed apples, shortbread, something like creme brulee floating in there as well. As Philip said, much more body, much more what I would expect, put it that way.
Anybody else have any comments on it?
I would say it's a glorious whiskey. It's not as good as the Barolo, but that was well, it absolutely stunned me. And I couldn't believe it was possible for a wine cask whiskey to work. But this is really interesting. I've never come across Chardonnay cask whiskey before. And I have to say, I'm going to be buying a bottle. Full stop.
Iain, you've got the Chardonnay sort of core release that is that still actually available? I haven't seen it other than on secondary market, but the Chardonnay cask was quite a nice dram, and that was at a very reasonable price point as well.
Yeah, we've still got the Chardonnay as part of the classic range.
Yeah.
You know, and we've kind of been tweaking. We've been playing around at the edges of these whiskies in the classic range over the last few years, as you know, time and stock has allowed us to do. We've been increasing finishing times, so as I say, giving it that little bit longer. And the Chardonnay was the first to come to market where we hit a 3-year finishing, or second maturation, whatever you want to call it at that point. But the Chardonnay in the classic range is currently my favorite in the classic. It's kind of superseded the port finish, purely because we've now got the stock at that slightly longer finishing period, which has made a big difference.
Can I pick on somebody for their feedback? Chris Chalk, what was your view on that one, if you don't mind my asking?
No, not at all. And I'm still still pondering, actually. It's more complex than I was expecting. It maybe a touch sweet for me. Yeah, but it's making me think, which I think is a real compliment in and of itself. I was interested in the Barolo comparisons. Actually, I really didn't like that. Barolo really took against it, but this it's definitely making me think a lot more than the Phoenix Rising, which I found pleasant. This is, yeah, it's decent, really decent.
Yeah, I think it actually punches slightly above its weight. I mean, I know it's 46% anyway, so it's got a reasonable ABV anyway. But if you did this blind, I think this would confuse me. I'm glad I know what it actually is.
But weirdly, the alcohol doesn't feel that great, that much higher than the Phoenix Rising.
Yeah, it's still, yeah, it definitely doesn't have the big ABV hit, but I think it is quite thick bodied.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's the bit would
I've still got some of the Chardonnay cask, like the core range. And yeah, for me it's kind of like that with a bit of kick.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
And to go back to John's point, I think it was John. Sorry, I was trying to glance through the screen, but you know, that to me is Glen Moray, and those kind of descriptions you made. It never feels it's ABV. It never feels like you have to reach for the water. You know, we've done cask strength at 60 plus. And it's always got that lovely texture. It's got that lovely oiliness to its character. And whenever we do cask strength, you know, these are the kind of features of Glen Moray that call out as the DNA of Glen Moray.
Steve, what are you thinking? Steve Layla. I'm half expecting this to be the slight fly in the ointment. Come on.
Yeah, it's not my favorite, as you may have
I didn't
guessed.
think it would be.
I also find this a bit more. I can taste more kind of the charred effect on this than I could on Phoenix Rising, but I get quite a bitter note as well that I'm struggling a little bit with. And I think it might have been. I'm not sure. I think Dennis mentioned ginger. I get that as well. So yeah, I'm battling with it a little bit.
Right. Okay.
Don't get me wrong. It's not in Chenin Blanc territory, but it's yeah, but it wouldn't be. It's the second best whiskey I've had tonight.
Cheers, Steve. Yeah, thanks. Dave. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say that the day I retire is the day I take a white wine cask that Steve loves. That's when I know my job is done. Work is over.
Dave Ogden, what are you thinking? Oh, is he there?
I am here, Carl. I'm just moving around. I actually really quite like this. I thought the first was a great breakfast dram, Ian. I probably agree. It's maybe not up there with the best of whiskies, but do you know what? You have to start somewhere, and I think it's a great opener for a day, as in for an evening or a day session, whatever else. This is a beautiful whiskey, the number 2. Fantastic. I think it balances well the typical bourbon characteristics of Glen Moray with the Chardonnay. I think it's, yeah, I can't say anything more than it's just a fantastic whiskey.
Okay, thanks. Shall we do the old thumbs up, thumbs down, and all the rest of it? What are we gonna go with? I think that's a. Ooh. Okay. Oh, a couple of sideways ones. I had a feeling Steve might have been. Okay, all right. Okay, so I'm gonna pick on Steve. Steve Sharp. What are you thinking? You look happy.
Oh yeah, I was a thumbs up. Notes I'd taken was just classic Speyside character. When you were talking about blind drams, doing it blind, I'd love to do it side by side with the Speyburn 15 because they were very similar profiles. I was getting a lot of the sweet, the dryness, the spice, the pepper, all of that, and it just took me back to enjoying a Speyburn 15. So when you talked about punching above its character, I definitely agree with that. So I'm yet to hear what its price point's going to be, but I'm sure it's going to be competitive. So I'll definitely be adding it onto my wish list, which is never ending.
What is the price point on this, Ian? Do you know?
That one comes in at £65 a bottle.
Right.
Just a heads up, that one is only available at the distillery. We felt Elgin should only be available in Elgin. So,
fair enough. Do you still offer? If anybody wanted to buy a bottle, would you be able to ship it out to them and stuff if they're...
Yeah.
Okay.
Not for the next 2 weeks. That's us closed. So you can phone to your heart's content for the next 2 weeks. But if anybody answers the phone, something's gone completely wrong, please let me know. But after that, yes, you can give us a call up and we'll ship stuff out to you.
Yeah, great stuff. Okay, thank you. And then obviously the NEWAS discount code still applies, 50% off when you just mentioned.
No, what we'll do for NEWAS is it's normally £10 shipping for up to 6 bottles in the UK. We will waive that with the mention of the word NEWAS. Does that work?
That's very
Acronym?
kind.
What do we want to go with there?
That's spot on. Thank you. Grand. Okay.
I thought he was going to say 50% off for the next 2 weeks while there's nobody.
Yeah.
50% off for the next 2 weeks.
It's a 100% discount for the next 2 weeks. So if anybody answers the phone, it's all free. So.
Right, we'll head up and we'll start opening the place now.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said that, should
I? Well, cheers. Yes. So I think Holly, Becca, you were a bit sideways on this one, if you don't mind me asking, and then we'll dive into dram number 3. But what's your close that off?
I like the nose on it, really nice and sweet on the nose, but on the palate there was a hint of sulfur in there for me, or something sulfur-like, and yeah, puts me off, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Okay.
For me, I really like the nose. It was really floral and sort of like kind of a lot of vanilla-y, donutty, pastry-like sort of thing. But on the palate, I think that the fruit was it was like a really cooked or stewed Bramley apple, like something quite, it was muted fruit, I guess. And yeah, there was that little hint of sulfur.
But the empty glass, just
the nose.
Yeah, the nose when the glass is empty after a minute or two is lovely. Just really sweet perfume-like smell.
Yeah, perfume and floral, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Right. Well, what dare I ask, Iain, was your number 3 in the order of things?
The port cask finish.
The port cask. Okay, that is. So again, I've knacked it up because that's your sample number 4, people. Right. So
Honestly,
sample number 4 is the port cask.
You were so confident when you said this was the order. I was impressed with the confidence in your response.
He's never that confident, really.
I knew I'm good at this, really. So sample number 4 is the next one.
Come on, guys, it's Christmas. He does try.
You can see the colour of the port when you pour it.
Yes. So this we kind of had to adjust this tasting a little bit. We had hoped that we would be tasting both of our warehouse ones that we'll be releasing in January next year. But we had 1 or 2 issues with the TTB, because those of you will know, I'm kind of jumping ahead to talking about warehouse 1, but just explain why we kind of adjusted it and played it around, because this one wasn't meant to be included. But warehouse 1 used to be a UK only release, but we rolled it out to global for next year because the popularity in the UK, it's been one of our success stories in the recent years, and they've been screaming out for it in our international markets. So the warehouse ones were actually due to be launched in November, beginning of November. But because we were launching it in the US, you've got to go for what's called TTB approval, which is the UK's tobacco and alcohol industry's labelling authority. I'm sure, I don't know if anybody spots on Twitter occasionally, there are people who troll through the TTB announcements because they post the labels before products are launched so that people can give feedback and comment if they have any issues with any labels. And so you can generally find out what's about to be released from a distillery before it's actually released. We were having some real difficulty with that. They came back. One of the weird things was we had the word natural color on it. And they didn't like that. And we thought surely that's something which distilleries have done before, but they called us out on that. So we had to go back and fix that. And then another thing, the label was actually announced. Somebody had picked up on it on Twitter and noticed the other day, which means we're at the final stage. So we're about to get that coming out. So this one was thrown in to replace one of the warehouse ones that we've not been able to get for this. And it's actually a cask that I had selected for Bottle Your Own just before I went off on a trip. So it was a quick cask selection, and I've not done a tasting with it. In fact, I've not had a full glass of it since I picked the cask a few months ago. So I'm kind of going to be enjoying this one with you, not quite for the first time, but close to it for me. And I certainly haven't included it in any tastings yet. But on first nosing, I'm glad I picked this one, and I'm glad we've got it in the tasting. And this is our cask number 1 in our Bottle Your Own at Glen Moray at the moment. And just to let people know how we operate, so that there's cask 1, cask 2, and cask 3. For those who've been in the distillery, that's just from left to right. Cask 1 is our £60 non-peated bottle, and that is always a whiskey under 10 years old. Cask 2 is our £99 Bottle Your Own, non-peated, and that is a whiskey always over 10 years old. Now, we generally try and push it a bit over 10, and it can sometimes be a little under 10 for the first one. And then we have cask number 3, which is our peated one. The reason we kind of segregated the casks is because we used to have one cask. Now, we call it Bottle Your Own. It's not bottle from cask, because it's a steel lined drum that we decant into once we've selected the cask, and you bottle it. It looks like a cask, but we don't lie or pretend that it's anything other than you're bottling your own. But we discovered once, when we used to have just one drum, when we put a peated one in, no matter how often we flushed it, no matter how we tried to clear it, the taint from the previous peated cask just carried on into the next one. So that pushed us into this avenue of having a selection, so that we could always have a peated one. We could always keep the price point at the lower age, but we could also introduce an older one as well. Hugely successful for us. Our Bottle Your Owns outsell every single whiskey that we have at the distillery combined. You could pick any one cask and it would outsell all of our other whiskies for the entire year combined. So this is the real Glen Moray success story, and something we're super proud of, something we really are delighted with. We use it as a bit of a sounding board sometimes. The first ever cider casks, I know I said I wouldn't mention their name, came out and Bottle Your Own. The SWA didn't blink an eyelid. They didn't bother, because Bottle Your Own obviously flew under their radar. The success of them on Bottle Your Own meant that we went into a bigger release, and that's when we got pulled up on it. And there's a number of other casks that we've brought out, you know, as a testing ground for future releases, just to gauge reaction amongst the consumer, because, you know, brands do, I'm sure you probably know this, we do monitor social media. We look at what you're saying, and we put a black mark next to your name. That's why Steve's not allowed back to distillery. So we like to see what people are saying. We like to see what reaction is. We like to see what feedback is. And our Bottle Your Own is our sounding board at the distillery. However, occasionally, in this case, it was a case of we wanted to put something in the lineup that we didn't have anything off on the shelf. And at the moment, we've got a hell of a lot of stuff on the shelf. So we kind of were slightly more narrowed, and I went to a kind of a stalwart for Glen Moray, one that works each and every time, and that's one of our port casks. Yeah. So cask number 1 at the moment, it's a 7-year-old, 6 years in bourbon. This I didn't know until after we had selected it, because it's not something which I generally look at until afterwards. And that was that it's only a year-long finish. And, you know, we've been trying to do more with our finishing periods. We're trying to up them. It's kind of been the direction we've been taking of late. So this one surprised me. The port has taken quite a grip of this after only a year finishing. And I think this kind of ties in nicely to the story I'm about to go into, and someone I'm pretty sure all of you who've been on a tasting with me before where we've had a port cask within it has heard that Glen Moray is owned by the world's #1 port producer, which is La Martiniquette. So our access to port casks are second to none. We've got direct access to our own port producer, which I happen to have a bottle of here, Port of Cruz, one I took home from the distillery tonight because it will be my Christmas port. And that's the port, that Tawny port there, the 10-year-old Tawny, that's the cask we typically use. That's
What's the ABV on it, Ian?
so this one is clocking in at 57.9. This is cask strength, so it's got a bit of a kick to it, this one. The cask yielded 184 bottles, so it's not a port pipe. It's a barrique in this case. So slightly smaller, which has helped, I think, to bring more of that port character through. And it's the fact that we get them directly from Port of Cruz means that I asked Stephen a few months ago, actually, you know, from him ordering port casks to us filling them at the distillery, how long does it take? And he said about 3 weeks on average.
Wow.
So from them being tipped in Portugal to landing in the shores of Scotland at the distillery and us filling them, it's only 3 weeks. So that freshness as well has got to play a part. I can't say with absolute certainty, but for me, that is playing a part in why we get such a kind of full, rich port style in things like this, where it's quite a short finish. And if we look at our classic collection, classic range, the port was always in the lower echelons. We didn't have to wait as long. Like I just said earlier, that the Chardonnay, we leave it 3 years. The port, we never had to, because it really does bring a lot to the table quite quickly. And I think for my money, it's been a lot to play with the freshness and the way in which we source our port cask and how we get them to the distillery. So this is a great example of this.
Sorry, can I just ask what port was it? Do you know?
Port of Cruz, Tawny port.
Tawny.
Yep, it's this 10-year-old Tawny. That's what
right.
gets tipped from our casks.
Yeah, well, when we were there with Emma, when we did the tasting with Emma while you were off gallivanting in November, we tried some of that alongside this port with that, and it does have that characteristic, I think, in the port, like in the whiskey from the port, and it's a lovely port.
It is, our port is a great port. Like I don't drink huge volumes of port. A bottle every Christmas, and that's my selection. And for the last few years, I've been buying our company port, and that's not just me being a tight Scotsman. We don't get staff discount on our port, so I'm paying full price for it. So I do like it. So it's my go-to port. I think it works really well. It's quite a light Tawny. It's not too heavy. It's not too intense. It brings a lovely fruitiness to it. The coloration on the whiskey, it offers that slight kind of rosy blush kind of wine color to the spirit.
For 1 year, finish, it's been a very active cask. That barrique has added a lot to the whiskey.
Yep. And that's what I was talking about earlier, and that's in the first year we're letting what was incumbent within the cask come through. Give that a little bit longer, it starts to dry out a little bit, not in a bad way. It kind of refocuses the attention away from some of the kind of dark red fruit sweetness and brings a slightly different approach with the port. So when we do the likes of our 21-year-old port finish, we give it 2, 3, sometimes 4 years of a finish. And it works really well. It just brings this other dimension, slightly kind of more kind of antique, woody, slightly kind of drying finish to the spirit, which works well. But here, this one at a younger age, younger finish, it's allowing the bourbon in, but it's bringing enough of the port to the table as well.
It finishes well. I must admit, over the years, I've tasted a few port finishes and been sorely disappointed. They're great in the mouth, but when you spit or swallow, the finish just dies. That has got a finish. Well done.
I think it's that, lovely oiliness coats the palate and it lingers longer. It hangs about a bit and just brings, for me, the finish is more about the bourbon. It's that kind of vanilla character that you get with the bourbon casks that starts to then play a part in the spirit. At the front of the palate initially, it's about those fruits. It's about what the port can bring. And then we get the bulk of the maturation being allowed to show face in the finish of the spirit. And again, back to what we were saying earlier, it's 57.9. I don't know about you guys, but it doesn't feel like it to me. I've got no water on my table whatsoever here. It's not a whiskey that I feel I need to be adding, reducing. And I noticed somebody mentioned earlier it opens it up a little bit, and I missed that comment who it was, but somebody does. But for me, I don't think it needs it, and that is a sign of a good single cask whiskey, where it doesn't have you immediately grabbing for the water. When you start doing that, I think the alcohol is too prevalent, and this works at that strength.
Yeah, this one, yeah.
I think sometimes adding a water, I don't tend to add water much to a whiskey, but I understand the value that it basically offers you two drams for the price of one, because I think it can change the characteristic of the whiskey a reasonable chunk. So I can understand why people might do that. But you're right. For me, I wouldn't be adding water to this typically, but it'd be interesting to know whether it has dramatically changed it or in any way if you do. Any other comments on this one? What are you guys thinking? We're having some good comments on the chat.
I think it's lovely. Sweet, ripe fruits up front. Get a little bit of a bite of alcohol in the middle, and you get some nice warming spices coming in at the end. Absolutely lovely. Superb dram.
Yeah. Cheers, Adrian. I think, Chris, you were asking about the price. So this is actually one of the fill your own in the distillery visitor centre. So this one's the £60 dram number one in the shop. And again,
it's not bad for £60. That's pretty.
I think if you go around visiting distilleries right now, it's probably one of the least expensive fill your own.
I'd say aren't all Diageo's like 120 quid at the moment?
Yeah, 120 or 130 quid.
I'm struggling slightly with it. For no fault of this port cask, I think just doesn't tend to agree with me. But for 60 quid, Christ, that's real value.
It is.
I have a question. Is anybody going to the distillery soonish?
Well, not for the next 2 weeks. No.
I mean, I don't think the cask is going to be empty that quick. But if anybody's going, you know me, I'm good for it. Could somebody get me a bottle, please?
Well, Tina, what I'll do is I'll have a word with Iain, and we'll organise when it reopens in a couple of weeks. I'll organise an order for you, and I'll get it shipped to me, and then the next time we meet up, we'll get
yeah. I mean, it's not as if I haven't got any whiskey at home here, right? So I'm not going to die of thirst anytime soon. But as I said, I have 23 Glen Morays here at home, but I don't have a port cask finish.
Yeah.
I can't have that.
Well, this is a good one to add to your collection there, Tina. We'll get it sorted for you.
That would be rather nice. Thank you.
My question was sort of related, which was, when can we phone up the distillery to make an order? What's the best date?
We open on the 8th, but don't phone in the morning because we've got a Christmas tree and that to take down on the 8th. So the important job's then. So a couple of hours into the 8th, and we're all good. We're all good after that.
I get the feeling you're going to have a queue of NEWAS members ringing up on that day. It's a cracking whiskey. I don't think it needs water. I think it's pleasant enough without. But when you do add it, it really does change it. The fruits come out perfectly. I mean, your 2011 peated port, I think you had at the distillery, that's been on my wanted list for a long, long time, and I was hoping that would be here tonight. But when I saw this one, I wasn't sure what to think with it not being the peated, but oh my god, that's beautiful, really nice.
I do think actually I've tried a couple of the Glen Moray peated port releases, and they do go well together. They're very good together.
Yeah, this year's distillery editions. One was the peated port, and the other one was our first ever fully matured port. We did a 14-year-old fully matured port, and that sold out in next to no time. We always talk about a sherry bomb, but it's the first time I've ever spoken about a port bomb. It was just it was dark, it was intense, it was complex. It was, you could lock yourself in a dark room for 3 weeks in that one, and not come out with the same conversation. It was just a really fun and funky whiskey, and that sat alongside the peated one. I think it overshadowed the peated one a little bit, but the peated was very, very good. Anything we've done peated in any kind of fortified wine cask seems to work particularly well. One of my favorites, don't know if anybody ever tried the peated PX we did. That was quite special as well.
It was really good.
Is that 14 years in a white port cask or a ruby port cask?
That was a 20 port cask as well.
20 port cask, rather.
Yeah. So we can see what this one's done after a year. You know, multiply that into 14 and remove the bourbon maturation, and that is what it was. It was just intense, and it's the first time we've ever done fully matured port. And what made it even more funky was that we filled it at still strength. So we take our spirit off at 69%. We normally fill in the cask at 63.4. So that was, the spirit went in. So that intensity of alcohol on top of it after 14 years was an added dimension that just brought something else completely unlike Glenmoray. You could have put that one in front of me and I would never have guessed it was Glenmoray. It was something quite alien to what we typically do, and it was fun for it, slightly different.
Iain, this is beautiful. I mean, this is my Christmas dram, so thank you for that one. And cheers. If this was in a blind tasting, I wouldn't pick up 57.9. No way. And like, I think it was John's comment as well. I tried a few ports over the years, and most of them seems to be very short. And this is long and oily. This is beautiful. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Well done.
Cheers. Thanks for the comment.
So I'm looking forward to when we do the thumbs up, thumbs sideways, and so on. Whether there's going to be any thumbs down on this one. Could we? I mean, it's not often that we ever have a complete sort of lockout of any negativity. So let's give it a go, shall we? So again, thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down. I'm not going to do anything yet. Oh, even Steve Layla's even got a thumbs up on it. My God. Oh, Jason, I'm coming to you. Iain Love, what was your view on it? Oh, sorry, yeah, okay. Dave Ogden, what was your view on it? Oh, okay. I think I got everybody there. Okay, so Jason, I'm gonna have to visit. I'm gonna have to pick on you. Come on, you were the outlier.
No, I almost put it up just to avoid this. For all of the port finishes, and it's everybody's, I've just never quite gotten on with it. I feel like it's been a bit cheap and used the same glass for the whole evening after dinner. So, but I did pick up a very interesting note of like a cacao chocolate on the nose, which I thought was quite an actual interesting sort of element of it. As port casks go, it's absolutely great. Well, probably one of the best. It's just not the kind of thing that I would choose for myself, but that's why we have these evenings.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's well executed.
Okay. So that was kind of like a shit sandwich, wasn't it? you kind of put the bit in the middle there as not so good, but you were trying to kind of fluff it out with some positivity
Absolutely.
There.
You know, it's there's only good whiskey, isn't there? You know this.
That's absolutely true. Yeah. Unless it's Hague. No, sorry. What did I just say there? No, sorry. Right. Okay. So take what you will from that, Iain. It looks like it's pretty resounding positive stuff there on that one.
Yeah, I'm glad we threw it in there. It was it almost didn't make it to the tasting, so it seemed to go down well. Yeah. I know Jürgen put on number 4 as the best looking legs. I'm counting number 4 on the long on the screen. So Simon, that looks like a compliment to you. You've got the best looking legs, according to Jürgen.
Just out of interest, what would have been the dram if it had been ready in time? What was the
would be the so the 2 new warehouse ones that we'll be bringing out start of the year is Rioja fully matured and the peated Rioja. We've got the peated Rioja tonight. Yeah. So basically the samples that we got, because we couldn't get them out, the whiskey's bottled. The 2 warehouse ones are in bottle, they're just not labeled because we haven't got the label printed, because we haven't had sign off to allow us to do that, because I say these whiskies were meant to be brought out back in November time. So we're waiting for that to be finalised. We got the samples released. We managed to get them duty paid so that we could get the samples out to do tastings. But DHL decided to clearly play football with one of the packages, and that was the one that had the non-peated, fully matured rioja. That meant we had no samples left, and we couldn't get them duty paid and released from stock in time to include in tastings. So that's why we had to remove it. So we've got a soggy box. That sounds awful. That sounds terrible. I started saying that phrase and I heard myself saying it. So yes, we yeah.
Well, to be fair, Iain, I think that's the first time we've ever had the word soggy box, mentioned in a NEWAS tasting. So well done on that one.
Yes.
Pair of gloves and cream cures it.
You'd know, Bobby. You'd know.
Did anybody else want any final comments on that one before we head into the next dram in the lineup? We all good? Should we dive in then? So I'm guessing that it might be sample number 3, which is the Tokaij finish. Is that right?
Yep, you're bang on.
So sample number 3. And this one, well, shall we say what the ABV is yet, or shall we let everybody have a little bit of a play with it first?
Not on the bottles, so we'll add a bit of jeopardy to the evening. People can call out what they think it is. So yeah.
I go and cheat and grab the bottle I got in.
Okay, yeah, you're not allowed in this competition. You're not allowed to play this one.
You're going to the living room and check.
So this one, nicely teed up by the conversation about Warehouse 1, not soggy box, but this one is our Tokaij casks, which back in 2022, we released a Tokaij as part of the Warehouse 1 collection. So I'm pretty sure we included that in a tasting at some point. So I'm pretty sure we've tried it, whether it was during COVID or kind of in a slightly more relaxed atmosphere post-COVID, I'm not sure. But this is the same batch of casks, just given longer. It's a longer finish. In fact, this just made it to 3 years of a finish. So it just got over the line. So we've got a 15-year-old, which is 12 years in bourbon and 3 years in Tokaij. As I mentioned earlier, this is cask 2, so over 10 years old. It's a £99 bottle your own that we do. This one yielded 300 bottles. So it's a chunky sized cask. They use, I believe they're called gonks, if I remember correctly, from Tokaij. It's a specific cask that they use within the process. It's spelled G-O-N-C, whether it's pronounced that way in Hungarian, possibly butchering the language there. Might be some other way of describing it. But this one, sorry, I'm reading the comments as I go. The Warehouse 1 Tokaij was one of my favorites of the range. The Tokaij flew. Tokaij was actually probably second to the Barolo cask, I think, in terms of one of the fastest ones to sell out. For me, the Tokaij came out at the right time, and by that what I mean is I'm a great believer in whiskey for seasons. My whiskey palate, my whiskey choices change in the winter time to they do in the spring, to they do in the summer, to they do in the autumn. So we brought the Tokaij out in the summer, and it was a perfect summer dram. It just had a lightness to it, softness, the sweetness, the kind of orange peel character of the Tokaij just felt like a proper summer whiskey. This one's been out for a little bit longer. We've had it in the bottle your own for a few months now, so it was kind of a autumnal approach. And I think that little bit longer in the Tokaij, the extra 2 years of finishing, made a difference to this one. It brought more of that orange peel, brought more of it's less fresh. There's a little bit of kind of bitterness. To me, this is a whiskey which would make, I've not done it yet, but would make a perfect old fashioned. For me, this is what I would look for in the base of an old fashioned. I think it works really well. It's got that feel, it's got that texture. Replacing a bourbon in there, it just brings that lovely oiliness, and just that intensity of flavor that I think would suit it. But here we're tasting it in its own right, as it should be, as a single cask, straight up, without water. Don't go with water on this one, I don't think. Because the alcohol, which we're going to put it out for guesses in a second, again, I know we've spoken about this already tonight, but it doesn't feel like it has you reaching for the water. It doesn't feel like anything near the strength it hits. So on that note, before I go put my foot in it, does anybody want to take a stab at the strength of this?
Or you can put it in the chat if you want to just stick it in, and then everybody can kind of put their guesses in. Obviously, if you know, don't put the guess in.
Yes, I'm going to open it up.
I was going to go low 50s until you said what you just said there, Ian. So
you gave a hint.
Yeah.
I don't think I did. I don't think I did.
I was thinking about 57, 58.
We've got one very close.
Close, yeah.
If you had said that it was a 48%, I would have believed it, tasting it and nosing it. You're saying it is something more than that.
Yeah.
Of course, we'd have to believe that. But it comes across beautifully in the 48% category.
Yep. You don't have to believe it. It's on the label. We'd get into trouble if we went pretending it was something else. So it's but I'm going to put you out your misery, and I'm going to give the points to, who was it? Adrian.
Yeah. 0.1 off.
You were 0.1 off. It's 55.2. God, you're useless, Adrian.
No, I was just going to say that's still wrong, though, isn't it? That's still wrong.
Still wrong. Yeah, miles away. So yeah, 55.2. So hats off to Adrian. That's as close as you could be. In fact, we could call it 55.1. We'd be allowed to, I think. Is it point? There is an allowance on labeling that you can be out, and I can't remember exactly what it is off the top of my head. John, you probably know, do you?
I think it's half a percent alcohol.
Is it 0.5%? Yeah, it's something in that realm. So we could probably get away with it.
You could easily get away with it.
Yeah,
Adrian, you were right.
You were right. Yours is maybe 55.1, so we'll give it to you. So 55.2. That's where it's clocking in at. As I said to you, 12 years in bourbon. Tokaij, obviously, is a Hungarian dessert wine. It's sweet. When we first did Tokaij, I knew nothing about Tokaij. In fact, when the casks were being ordered, I was referring to them as Tokaij. I had no clue. I was ignorant to the product. I knew nothing about it. We ended up getting in an expert from London who took us through tastings of Tokaij, so that we could understand a little bit more about it, which was fascinating and opened my eyes up to a whole new world. And it's surprising we hadn't done anything like this before, because it really suits our spirit. Tokaij and Glen Moray just seem to be a perfect match. They work so well together, and it's always nice when you come across something that you hadn't been utilizing or tapping into previously that just fits hand in glove with what you do at the distillery. And Tokaij is absolutely that. So I believe Petronias, for those of you who are Tokaij experts, this is a 5 Petronia Tokaij. Don't know the brand, but that's where it sits in the Tokaij world.
So Ian, is it worth just mentioning that what you have control of at Glen Moray, correct me if I'm wrong, this is my understanding, is that obviously a big chunk of the production of Glen Moray is allocated for, going forward in terms of things like your core range and so on. And then you get a small percentage, I think it's about 2% of the casks that are unallocated. And that's the piece that you get to play with. and decide what goes into things like the visitor centre for the fill your owns, and also for things like the warehouse one releases. Is that the kind of thing? Is that on the unallocated stock, or is that in the allocated stock? Or
yeah, warehouse one is now allocated because it's gone global, so we have to look at much bigger volumes than we were previously working with.
Yeah.
For UK releases, with UK releases, it was 4 or 5 casks. We're now, increasing the volumes quite considerably. So Stephen, if you've not met Stephen, wonderful guy. He's our head of whiskey creation. He's looking after the bulk of our stock. He's managing and forecasting and planning for our core range throughout. And then Stephen and I work together with, all our weird and wonderful cask ordering. We'll have a sit down every so often. And some of it is stealing from other distilleries. Some of it's like I've tried this from this distillery. I think it might work with Glen Moray. Some of it is looking for breaking new water. You want to be first to the table with stuff that is good, because that excites people like yourselves. The whiskey consuming public look for something a little bit different. They're looking for different casks. So we're always on the lookout for something interesting, something different. But as I say, some of it is maybe I've been to a festival somewhere, I tried something, thought that works really well for them. Why shouldn't it work for us? So there is a little bit of borrowing from other distilleries, much like I'm sure they do as well. And Stephen will allocate the stock. So we work on a system called drams, and our conversation is, if it's in the wild, if it's non-allocated, if it's not going anywhere, then I've got the freedom to dip in and draw some samples and pull it for bottle your own or any special one-offs or limited releases that we're doing. So that's a stock that I get a little bit of freedom with, but it lands on Stephen's shoulders first and foremost, because he's got to look at the much, much bigger picture. You're saying 2%, I'm not even sure it's that, but it could be close to that. But yeah, so he's in charge of the stock. And even if it's in, as we call in the wild, free roaming casks that have got no direction in life, I still have to run it through him, say, look, we've got this one. Are you okay with us going with this? And he generally is. He's never once said, no, don't do that. So he's always pretty much on board with it, but keep him firmly in the loop, make sure he's on board with whatever's happening, because he could have his eye on it for something, but not have got round to allocating it. So we work closely together. He's a great guy. If you've not met Stephen, he's a lovely guy, really good for the brand. He's been with us a few years now. I've really enjoyed working with him. In fact, we shared an office for the first couple of years. I think he got sick of sitting next to me and decided to leave Elgin and move down to our head office. I scared him out of Elgin completely. So he's now working out of our head office in Bathgate. So he's down there because his role encompasses not just Glen Moray, but our blends. We are the world's 3rd biggest blending company now with the blends that we own. So a big chunk of his role is managing the stock, not just for Glen Moray, but for Curry Sark, for Label 5, for Sir Edwards, and any other own label blends that we may be doing for customers and that out and about. So he's got a big job with the stock down at Glen Turner with our grain distillery as well. So he's got a lot in his hands there. So
it'll be interesting. I don't know if it's feasible. I don't know if he does these kind of things, but it'd be lovely, maybe one tasting in 2024, to maybe if we could encourage Stephen to come and join us for a night. That would be good.
He needs no encouragement. Stephen would be delighted to do stuff like this. He likes doing it. He's a busy man, but if we could get him aboard, he'd be delighted to. So.
Yeah, it'd be good to get you two arguing on screen.
Not all Tokaij is sweet.
Nope. No, that was a discovery of mine as well. It's different styles, but typically it's viewed as a sweeter dessert wine. Yeah. So, can I just to add to the conversation, that we never argue, Stephen and I. We agree on everything. He's a good Rangers man. He knows his football. We get on perfectly. So.
And he also knows his rugby.
He also knows his rugby. Yeah, that part of it we don't argue, because I don't know rugby, so we don't argue on that.
Well, so shall we do the, unless there was any other comments on this one so far, shall we do the old thumbs up, thumbs sideways on this one? What's everybody thinking? Ooh, Simon, I'm coming to you, Okay, right, okay, Steve as well, sideways. Ooh, Jürgen, you're actually heading south on this one.
Steve's thumbs up.
Henry, what was your sideways? Okay, all right. So this is a bit more of a room splitter on this one. Iain Love, what was your sideways as well? Ooh, okay. So anybody who didn't put a thumbs up, would you like to kind of shout forward and kind of give your view on this one? Henry, come on. You've been quiet tonight so far. How about you jump in on this one?
I think this is the second Tokaij cask I've tried. The first one being the Glen Morangi, and both of them have that nose. I think after you mentioned it, that's what sort of hit me, is that orange peel, but almost an artificially sweet orange peel taste to it that just doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah.
And then I thought it was just the Glen Morangi, and I tried this and it had that exact same note, and I think that's the note that just doesn't sit with me.
Henry, did you try the fragrant drops Tokaij that we had in the tasting with fragrant drops?
Yes. And
did you get the same?
I think again it's like I tried and it the Tokaij just didn't sit with me, but I didn't quite pick out which note it was that didn't sit well with me.
Okay, because I think that was a Linkwood, wasn't it? That was the Tokaij finish, if I remember rightly. Actually, was it fully anyway? So yeah, okay. Thank you.
That was a full maturation, Carl. I think it was 15.
Yeah, 15-year-old in the Tokaij, and that was the Linkwood, if I remember rightly. Yeah. Okay. Steve, I think you were sideways on this one. Steve Sharp, sorry.
Yeah, I was. For me, it's I love the nose and I love the palate. I love the notes of the orange peel. I get a lot of fig from it as well. So I'm loving all that. It's the finish I'm struggling with this one. It's the bitterness. And I don't know if that's down to the ABV, but I've tried watering it down and it just neutralized it. So it's challenging me, which I quite like as well. So it's not as straightforward as the port I loved. Whereas this one, I'm not sure of, but I like that about this whiskey. I like that it's challenging me. It's making me think, and it makes me kind of. I was definitely buying the port, and now I'm thinking, do I buy this because I like how it's challenging me?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I hear you, because it sometimes it is those ones that kind of sit in the middle. You're not sure whether you like or not like, or really like or not really dislike it, and you end up wanting to spend time on it. So I hear you. Iain Love. Oh, sorry.
So just to say, on that comment, sometimes a whiskey that puts the brakes on you as a drinker is a good whiskey. Sometimes, it kind of stops you in your tracks a little bit, makes you think about it, whether it's something that maybe is slightly off-putting, maybe a little bit too strong, a little bit too intense. Because sometimes whiskeys can be too drinkable and you lose them in a blur and a haze of an evening. But one that stops you in your tracks is always interesting, I think.
I've got a wife that does that.
You need that, Bobby. You need
it. So, Iain Love, you've been quiet tonight. What was your view on this one?
It's fine. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's good. I think it's kind of middle of the road for me. But I've never really, maybe kind of like Henry, I've never really been grabbed by a Tokaij cask. I've tried a few and a couple from Glen Moray, and it's always been the same. I don't know. There's something. I can't quite put my finger on it. There's almost something savoury on the back end that I should probably think more about, but I just can't be arsed because it's just fine. If you know what I mean, it's hard to describe.
Yeah.
But I love the Chardonnay. I thought Phoenix Rising was a real triumph for the price and the ABV. So there's gold in Glen Moray without a shadow of a doubt, but this one maybe not quite for me.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
How much is this one to buy?
This one's
This is the
99.
99. Sorry, Ian.
That's all right. Sorry.
Is
How old was it?
this is the Handfill number 2, so it's the £99 fill your own, yeah?
15 years old. Sorry, whoever asked that one. 15.
Yeah.
Yep.
So again, it's actually only available at the Distillery Visitor Centre.
15-year-old under £100. That's an absolute bargain in this day and age.
For a single cask, I like to think so.
Yeah, it is. And again, for Handfill, for fill your own, when you walk into any of the Diageo distilleries and you're looking at 120, 130 quid for typically something that is about 10, 11-year-old, you know, it compares very well compared with those. Not that I'm picking on Diageo or anything.
Why not?
They've got broad shoulders. They can take it.
They can take it.
12-year-old Kalila, Klein Leash from Distilleries, £130 now.
Yeah. Well, we were there in October. Yeah, we were there in October, and that it must be the same Handfill that they had on then. And yeah, I mean, it was nice. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't a 130 quid bottle for me anyway. Certainly wasn't. But anyway. Okay, shall we dive into, well, actually, before we dive into the peated numbers, because the next two are peated, can we have what people's lineup might be in terms of your number one being your favorite so far? Just if you put it in chat, what you think number one was your favorite down to the 4 that we've had so far. I'm just curious how they all kind of pan out.
2.
Are we going by bottle number or are we going by tasting order number?
The sample number. Sample number. So your favorite sample number to your lesser favorite. Okay, so four's looking
should have stuck with the symbols.
Yeah, the symbols might have been easier.
Right.
So lots of 4 coming out here. So Matt, you went with number 2, which was the Elgin. The Elgin, yeah.
No, number 2 is Phoenix Rising.
Yeah, that's it. Sorry, yeah.
This is where you said sample number.
Yeah, sample number. Sorry, yes, you're right. Sorry. Okay. So 4's definitely making the biggest appearance in terms of the favorite so far.
Remind me again, that is the port, wasn't it?
So sample number 4 is the port.
Yeah.
That does seem to have taken the lead somewhat. Okay. Not that it's confusing at all. It keeps the grey matter, you know. Yeah. It's like a quiz that we're going to potentially have shortly.
We have had 4 whiskeys. I like to keep things simple after 4 whiskeys.
So I guessed, Ian, that we would do the new Warehouse 1 as the dram number 6.
Yes, good. I thought you were going in the wrong direction.
All right, okay.
You got it right.
So sample number 5 is in fact the peated cognac cask. Okay. So that's sample number 5 is the next one.
Should there be 6 in the tasting?
Yes.
I've only got 5.
Oh, please tell me you're joking, John, you swine. Please.
Hang on a minute.
No.
Have you got a soggy box too, John? Did you go and take them through?
Some of you will actually, just to clarify as well, some of you who did the Robertson's tasting and I made a slight error.
Yeah, I've got a sneaking number 7 in there, yeah.
You will have received an additional dram that has the Christmas tree as the symbol, and that is the Tinanik that you should have got in your Robertson's tasting. So just to clarify, some of you will have got 7 drams in your tasting set. So apologies, but you've now got that.
It had fallen over.
Ah, good.
Right, folks, as you're turning to the peated stuff, I'm out.
You're running away. Well, Tina, it was lovely to see you, and have a good one.
Yeah, same to you. See you soon.
Bye,
Merry
Tina.
Christmas, Tina.
Bye.
Take care. Right. So number 5.
Tina was definitely there for the whiskey, not the chat.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Confirms that. Okay, so and actually, this is kind of where I wish we'd thrown in Twisted Vine, but just purely because it's a nice kind of sister act or counter act or whatever you want to call it. I don't know where I'm going with that. But it's the Twisted Vine is fully matured cognac. This is fully matured cognac. Also, same age. This is 8 years old. So same batch of casks. So if anybody has tried Twisted Vine, this is pretty much the cask strength peated version of that whiskey. So it's 8-year-old fully matured. They're big casks. These cognac casks are yielding 500 plus bottles. So we're going to have this one for a little while, especially given this time of year when the distillery is a little bit quieter with tourists. So this one's been around, so some of you may have already tried it if you've been to the distillery in the last few months, and if you're coming up in the next few months, you'll probably see this one hanging around, whereas the other two will probably leave quicker. As I say, fully matured, not finished, so no bourbon cask influence here whatsoever. It's the full maturation. 2015 stock. So we started peating in 2010. So we've got 5 years of peating under our belt by this point. So I like to think we kind of know what we're doing at this stage. For those of you who don't know, we'd never peated Glen Moray before. If you go back pre-1977, when we had our own maltings at the distillery, there was a tiny, tiny peat influence, not much at all. Post-77, when we started buying in from third party, zero peat, absolutely none whatsoever in any of our stock. 2010, we are now into the period of time where we're owned by La Martiniquez. They'd owned us for 2 years, and they kind of realized that, you know, within some of their blends, a percentage of the malt was peated, and rather than buy it or get it through reciprocal deals, they made the decision that we would start producing our own peated. So the decision to go down the route of peating at Glen Moray was not to do anything specifically from a single malt perspective. It was to give us the peated stock that we needed for blending. But it did offer us the opportunity to take a volume of that stock and put it to one side to release as single malt. And this is one of those examples. We do have the peated classic as part of the core range, and watch the space later, hopefully later this year. I haven't seen the release slate, but there is plans to do an older peated release, because we started in 2010, so we're now sitting on 13-year-old stock, so we've got older stock available to us. But this peated cognac, normally we don't like to go with big casks on the bottle your own, because we like them to burn brightly, quickly, and disappear, and we move on to the next thing. We want to keep it interesting, keep it fun. But this one jumped out at me. Sorry, I'm just seeing that comment jump in there. Don't know is the answer, Tim. Which cognac? We don't have it on our system as to where it came from. We do own our own cognac company within the business, but these weren't from there then. Now we are taking in our own cognac casks to fill at Glen Moray, but back then it would have been bought from a broker where we wouldn't have had that level of provenance available to us. Sorry, where was I going with that? Yeah, we don't normally like to do big casks, as I say, because they do tend to stick that little bit longer, and we want to keep it fresh, either for locals who come in to buy bottle your owns from us, or people who visit quite regularly want to keep it moving. And this one just stood out, and despite it being a big cask, I just felt we had to do it. And it was kind of nice at the time we were looking at bringing, or we just brought out Twisted Vine. So it was nice to have this in the bottle your own as a kind of something similar but different, if you get what I mean. The peat is Highland to Aberdeenshire peat that we're taking. The level of peat in our malt is 50 parts per million. In the spirit, it's roughly, I think this one was gauged at about 24 parts per million in the spirit in the final product. So that's what you're tasting. And, you know, for me, that's the ppm that counts. What you get in the malt is one thing, but unless you're standing at the distillery tasting the malt as it's delivered, you're not tasting that level of ppm. For me, it's what's in the spirit which counts more than anything. The peat is, and notice somebody said more on the nose than the palate. Who was that? That was Neil. Absolutely, couldn't agree with you more. And I've noticed that with any of the Glenmorrays we've done. Are you comparing the Twisted Vine with it? So yeah, for me, it always seems to burst through on the nose a little bit bigger and bolder. On the palate, it just seems to dissipate and softly fade off. And I think part of that's the fact that we're looking at Aberdeenshire, that Highland peat, rather than an Isle of peat or anything like that. It doesn't have that kind of medicinal character that you get with those peats. It is more of a slightly savoury peat. It's got a slight kind of smoked bacony character to it, and on top of that, it's got a kind of sweet heather style to it. And then combine that with the cognac influence, and Neil holding up the Twisted Vine rather kindly there. For me, it's got a lovely kind of, in Twisted Vine, it's more muted here because the peat obviously takes a little bit more of the billing on this one. But when you try it in the Twisted Vine, it just brings a lovely kind of hazelnutty character. And that seems to just kind of cut through a little bit more than any other part of the cognac with the peat sitting beside it. So this one is clocking. Have we done strength? Did we do strength?
No, we haven't done the strength.
No, we haven't.
Yet.
Good. So
Yeah.
Who wants to, that hasn't come up and bought a bottle, put out a guess on the strength of this one?
I think it's high.
Yeah, you can use chat if you want. Oh, sorry, go on, Jason.
High 50s?
Yeah.
Yep.
Ooh.
High, maybe 54.
Just the way it rubs between your finger and thumb and the way it hangs on the glass. Plus, knowing the bottle at 63, oh, you're still at 63.4. So.
Right, okay.
Well, there's nobody hitting it. Come on, Adrian, have you had your shout yet? You were point one out last time. Did I miss yours? Have you put it in?
No, I brought one before. So.
Oh, you bought one before. Okay, you're. Oh,
so I think now I'm getting this hint that people are just simply adding a bit more on.
We'll give it to Neil. He's the closest. He's not quite Adrian close, but he's relatively close. So 59.7 is where this one is.
Just shy of 60%.
Yeah.
And actually, I just want to throw in that actually I get a reasonable chunk of peat on both the palate and the finish. Yeah. So I was kind of slightly disagreeing. I think it's got a nice balance. It's definitely not overpowering or anything. It's definitely not a peat monster, but I think it's got a decent little kick of peat in there. I think.
Definitely. I agree with you. I think it's a 50-50. It really works.
Yeah. I you know, like I don't think it's subtle. I think it's enough there to let you know that it's there. It's definitely not subtle, Pete.
Maybe subtle is the wrong word. It's definitely there, but for what you get on the nose, I was expecting a lot more. Like I was expecting a full-on peat monster.
Yeah.
No, on the nose, the first thing that hits you is the smoke. On the palate, the first thing that hits you is smoke. But I wrote sparkling. I don't know why, because it really tingled across my tongue. Grapefruit, citrus, and a slight vinous note. As everyone has said, smoked ham. I added water. The smoke becomes more obvious with water, and the apples start to come out at that point. There's also a herby touch to it. Yeah, good.
Lovely stuff. Dave-O, I think you've been relatively quiet tonight. What do you think of this one, Dave?
I was lucky enough to, I think, try this actually with Iain 3 weeks or so ago. and I bought a couple of bottles, and I think when you're prepared to spend money on whiskey, that pretty much says everything you need to say. It's again a fantastic Glenmorangie. It's nicely peated. I agree. It smells on the nose. You get a lot more peat than you do within the palate. It's a fantastic cognac cask that's come out of this, and one of the. I still think it's inexpensive for a single cask bottling, and it's always hats off to Iain and the rest of the team for keeping those prices down. But it's also nice that it's so big that so many people get to have a bottle. It's that simple for me.
What is the price point on this, Iain?
Yeah, £60 as well.
Yeah, I mean £60.
That's very good.
I mean, I know that we've mentioned Diageo a few times, so I'm just gonna mention the D word, a distillery that's not too far from me. Their 16-year-old chill filled, well, 43% I think it is these days, or 46, that has caramel colour, which we all know what it is retailing for more than this. Why the hell? I mean, and I think this is the discussion Iain and I had actually, was why the hell would you go and buy something mass produced? Although it's a great whiskey, don't get me wrong, it's a great whiskey, Lagavulin 16. Why the hell would you go for that when you've got this at a cheaper price point, single cask, with these types of flavors?
Yeah.
Okay, it's not 40 ppm, but you don't need 40 ppm all the time.
Well, and I don't think it'll be 40 ppm at actual bottling.
No, I'll say Lagavulin.
No, well, it never is it?
Yeah.
So
it never is.
Yeah. So Royston, what do you think of this? You're a bit of a peat fan. I'm kind of expecting you to be quite positive on this one as well. So I'm just going to let you dive in while you're trying to wrestle with one of the dogs. I can't tell which one.
I think the dogs love it as well.
Looks like amber.
No, it's really lovely. And like you say, 60 quid. You can't challenge that, to be honest. That was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm quite enjoying this because every time I've got another port one here. I've tried the standard ones, so yeah, I'm doing every time we get port out. I've had 3 ports now, all with Glenmorangie. So yeah, it's going well.
Good stuff.
I actually think that this might have knocked the peated PX off its perch. Because I do love the bacon frazzles of, the frazzles thing of the peated PX is so lovely. But I think what I really enjoyed about this was this really kind of like a woody, ashy sort of wood char peatiness in this, which I haven't actually tasted in any Glenmorangie before. So I feel like it's pushed it slightly beyond normally it's like biscuity type peat. It's kind of like a sweet peat. And this has just pushed it into that ashy barbecue sort of wood char area, which is interesting.
Now you've said that, I'm going to have to get the PX.
The peated, I know, we've got it over there. It's like sitting there calling to us.
I'm going to have to do a side-by-side comparison.
This is like when you get I was going to say I would normally said that would have been my favourite of the night, but I still like the port better.
Oh, okay.
So
I think we're missing one person's opinion on this. It's Mr. Chenin Blanc himself. I'd be interested to hear what he's got to say.
Well, he's not a big peat fan either, so don't.
I appreciate that.
Iain, I would mute him.
It feels like I only get called upon to criticise Glenmorangie whiskies if I like them. The Tokaij casks in my top 3 whiskies this year. Nobody asked my opinion about that one. But this one I found I get quite subtle peat on the nose, not a huge amount up front, but then it comes in, and the finish I get a lot of peat, and I find it too drying on the finish. So I'm not necessarily a fan, but for balance, the Tokaij is superb, and the Phoenix Rising and the port I thought were good. But we need not just to come to people just because they don't like the whiskey. Makes us all look bad.
Steve, do you know what? The reason why I asked is because I think there's a bit of sulphur in this, and I just wondered if you'd picked up on it. There's not a lot, but for me, there's a tiny bit that might have thrown you.
Yeah, it's funny because someone else has messaged me privately, and they sent a picture of a series of matches being lit, and I kind of thought, really? And then when I started thinking about it, I thought, can I find any? And once you focus on it, I think you can find a little bit, but nowhere near enough to put me off. It's more the kind of, I find it a little bit too oaky, a little bit too drying. But yeah, I get what you mean. You can find a little bit.
Steve, it's a little bit of fireworks in there. I do like that. I'm a sulfur fan, so I don't mind that at all.
Yeah, that must be something about your heritage, Jürgen, because no, I'm I'm definitely not.
You should see when I grew up.
Can I just say thank you to Steve for not throwing me under the bus for the sulfur comment?
I was going to say name and shame. Come on.
Yeah, I wouldn't have done that, but Iain is big enough to take that on the chin, I'm sure. One thing I'm a bit surprised about is that I was expecting Iain to come on with a crown and a big medal and a badge, because no one's mentioned these World Whiskey Awards. I mean, I was if I'd been there, I'd be thinking Emma Ware's shoe-in for this. Emma Ware's guaranteed. And then a boss goes and steals the award off her. It's shocking. But the fact that the guy who's the world, the icon of whiskey, can refer to Tokaij as Tokaij, which is what I will call it from now on. That does make me feel better about some of the times I've said Glen Moray rather than Glen Murray.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Steve. I was going to open with me holding the award in front of me, but I thought that was maybe a little bit too much. But that was a really, really lovely ending to what has been. You know, I've been at Glen Moray now. This is my 19th year at Glen Moray, and I have had some great years at Glen Moray. None better than 2023. There's just, I hate to say this out loud because 2024 is just around the corner. Everything we've touched has gone well this year. We've had great events at the distillery. We've had record numbers through the doors. Sales have been fantastic. You know, as brand ambassador, there's always one trip of the year, and I do apologize, I'm about to use grown-up language here, but there's always one trip of the year where you go, why the fuck am I here? This is a waste of my time. This year I had none of those. Everything's been really, really good. It's just been a fantastic year. To get an award at the end of a year where you've had an amazing time and enjoyed your job just feels like, you know, just feels superfluous, ridiculous. So I didn't make it to the awards, so Emma picked it up kindly for me. In fact, my daughter came through, and I don't know if you noticed me reaching off screen. I got her to grab my phone. So I messaged Emma saying, come on for the last dram at least. So I've just messaged her. Hopefully she'll appear. So we'll get her for a tasting. But yeah, it's been a great year, and that award was just the icing on top of what I think I posted was a rather wonderful whiskey tasting cake. So it's been a great year. So.
Iain, you're forgetting the highlight for Glen Moray as a distillery. Surely was to be selected to attend the whiskey festival.
How was that?
Come on.
Did Zach behave himself? That's the question.
He did. It was very good, and he fitted in perfectly. He was like an indie bottler. What can I say?
Exactly. Yeah, and you know that's what makes, you know, a good year. You know, working with good people. And Zach is new to us. We've got a lovely girl called Jules who's joined us, who I get on amazingly well with. You know, working with these people, that's what also makes it fantastic. You know, I'm the one that gets to come out here and talk about it, and generally the ugly looking face of Glen Moray. But it's you know, we've got a whole team, and you know, the team this year, both at the distillery and in sales and everything else, that we've got a good bunch around us, which just makes it even more special to be able to enjoy a year like that with good people. So as I say, hopefully Emma can join us. We'll get her on if she's kicking around. And you can look at somebody else from Glen Moray other than my ugly looking mug.
I noticed no one was jumping in to defend you there, you know. I mean, it was.
I'm used to it. Yeah, it's all right. I'm well used to it.
There was no thumbs up.
I know. I was. Did you not pick it? I was fishing for it. I was just waiting. It's like when somebody keeps repeating their age, expecting you to go, you don't look that old.
I was getting to the point of being awkward there. Yeah.
Yeah. It was.
So we haven't done the old thumbs up for this one yet. So shall we do that now? What are we thinking? Stuart Evans there. Oh, well, we knew Steve was going to be sideways on this one. Oh, right. Okay, I think so. I can't even pick on anybody who didn't really like it because I'm not going to pick on Steve. He's had way too much airtime. Philip, what are you thinking? I know you've got a big thumbs up. Are you enjoying this one?
Very much so. I mean, in fact, it's because of Ollie in particular, but also Becca got me into this kind of whiskey. They did it rather subtly. They didn't tell me I was going to do it. That's how subtle it was. Really good. But consequently, I, as far as this is concerned, it's beautifully balanced. And I can see that I'm going to have to get a bottle. That's for sure. I like it very much.
We're detecting a slight, you're definitely not sitting on the fence on this one. Good stuff. Cheers, Philip. Albert, what are you thinking on this one?
It was really fantastic. The peaty sort of start to it, and then I got a really kind of like a lovely honey sweet flavor to it, and other flavors that I can't really describe, but lovely whiskey. That I've never had a whiskey which has got that peatiness, but the depth of the other flavor with it as well.
Yeah, normally it kind of gets a bit unbalanced, doesn't it? It's very difficult to kind of get it spot on where you're getting both kind of almost aligned, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, what are you thinking? Sorry, I'm just keeping you awake.
Yeah, I was just trying to find my mute button. The curse of this modern age. Yeah, yes, I really enjoyed that one. I got a little bit of tobacco leaf kind of thing. I remember, from my childhood, my grandfather, bags of green tobacco leaf kind of thing. I got a little bit of that on the nose. It was really good. And as you say, sometimes 24 ppm is just right. Sometimes 150 is also right. 24 was pretty good. My new favorite.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Well, I mean, can the preview of the new Warehouse One beat that kind of feedback, Iain? That's what we're worried about.
I'd like to think so. But very
so anyone
discerning.
guess what sample is next?
Number 6.
If you're getting it wrong at this stage, then we've got the whole evening wrong. So
all right.
Yeah.
All right. Here goes.
So, this is our new warehouse. Well, it's not even out. It's that new. So a preview rather than new release. Warehouse One, as I've touched on already, was always a UK release. We've now pushed it global. So this is our first collection of Warehouse Ones. For those of you who don't know, Warehouse One is our collection of whiskies which are cask strength and typically more experimental casks. I know we've tried one or two here tonight that are quite experimental, but this is our kind of bigger release of experimental casks rather than just keeping it solely to the distillery. Warehouse One is the warehouse you visit as you come into Glen Moray for a tour. So those of you who have been for a tour at Glen Moray will have been in Warehouse One. And that is where we keep, it's one of our dunnage warehouses, and that's where we keep most of our experiments. And the reason that there's nothing magical or mystical about Warehouse One, it's just a warehouse where actually, when I first joined Glen Moray, if you came on tour, we wouldn't have let you walk past the third stile, not for any health and safety reasons or not for any reason to hide or keep anything secret. It's just that everything behind the third stile was actually Macallan. Edrington rented our warehouse space for a long period of time. So they took up most of the capacity we had at the distillery. When we were taken over, we obviously wanted to take that back. So we started to kind of take hold of our own warehousing and fill it with Glen Moray rather than third-party storage for other distilleries. So when we started filling Warehouse One, we were talking a lot about the fact that Glen Moray was experimental with casks and how we were playing around with a lot of casks. We had a huge volume of weird and wonderful stuff that had no direction. You know, as I said earlier, the stuff that was in the wild for the kind of the planning for the future, it had no future. We had no direction for it. So we would talk about it, but it's much easier to show people than to talk about it, because a cognac cask looks very different from a sherry cask, looks very different from a port cask, looks very different from a wine cask, etc., etc., etc. So it's nicer, it's easier to point at these things during tours. So we started to fill Warehouse One with all these kind of weird and wonderful shapes and sizes of casks, so that we could point at it rather than have to talk about it quite so much. So that was the reason Warehouse One got filled with this interesting stuff. But now it means that it has a home. It's got a place where it belongs in the distillery. And that's why we call it Warehouse One. We've got this home of whiskies that are a little bit different, a little bit quirkier, not the usual bourbon cask Glen Moray approach that we take with the bulk of our stocks. So we used to call it Curiosity. Curiosity, we kind of painted ourselves in a bit of a corner, because there's only so much that's curious to people like yourselves. Because it might be curious to Glen Moray, but you've probably tried it somewhere else. You've probably tried it within another distillery. So we moved it to Warehouse One. So the Curiosity series, if any of you have got bottles from there, that's kind of morphed into Warehouse One. There was one major change we made when we moved from calling it Curiosity to calling it Warehouse One, and that was we moved it to cask strength, and we're keeping it at cask strength even for the global releases. So last year, or this year still, we had the three that we brought out, which was Oloroso, Amarone, and Amontillado. Next year, we'll be bringing the Riojas, 2 Rioja releases. You were meant to be trying both of them tonight, but as I said, sadly, one of them, DHL, decided to remove from the tasting for us. So the one you're missing out on is a fully matured Rioja. So non-peated Glen Moray has been fully matured, and I've forgotten the year actually. The fully matured is 2015. So distilled on the 16th of March and bottled on the 21st of August 2023. So that made it to an 8-year-old for the fully matured. So 8 fully matured in Rioja. The one we're trying tonight is the peated version. That's a finish. This is from 2012 and is, what's that, 11 years old, this one. It's a couple of years finishing in the Rioja. So we've got 2 years finishing. This is the second year. No, sorry, this would be the 2012, so 2010, 2011, 2012. This is our third year of producing peated stock. So we were kind of well on our way to having gotten used to it by this point. It's a little bit older than the cognac, but a finish, obviously. So we've still got some of that bourbon background that will come through in some of the character. Exactly the same peat source, same peat levels, same ppm. But here we've got the additional finish of the Rioja on top of everything else. This is my first time talking about this. We've done it on a tweet tasting, so it's very easy to sit in your living room and type out a few tasting notes, but when you've actually got to think about it and talk about it. But that afternoon prior to the tweet tasting, one note jumped out at me, aside from the peat, away from what the peat offers. And it was cherry hearing, you know, that kind of cherry character, particularly, I don't know if you remember back in the 80s and 90s, we used to get little chocolate liqueurs in the UK that were sugar coated on the inside and filled with spirit on the inside. And the cherry hearing one was always the one I loved as a kid. Shows you the kind of upbringing I had as a child. That was the one that I always used to love. And that flavor jumped out at me in this whiskey. It just brought me right back to that. from the 1980s. It was a character that came through. And then you've obviously got what the peat offers on top of that, with the difference in the flavour and character. The rioja itself, I don't think I would call it out as a rioja in first tasting. This is me talking openly, but it doesn't carry particular nuances that I would expect from rioja. The fully matured absolutely does. I don't know if the peat takes it or draws it in a different direction, but it just offers something a little bit different on this one, which I thought works really well. So when does a finish change to a maturation? Thought it was 2 years. 2 years is still a finish because it's not whiskey yet. The legal age for whiskey is 3. So if you call it a double maturation, when the finish is longer than 3 years. I better go.
There's not an actual legal.
No.
There's no, like the regs don't actually stipulate what or distinguish the difference between a second maturation and a finish. But I think that is a kind of commonly held belief that if it's a second maturation, it's got to be like 3 years or more.
And there's one question I've always had, and I'll defer to John in here because I know he knows he's well clued up on these things. I don't think there's I don't think there's a legal guidance as to how long it needs to be for a finish.
No.
You can put it in for a day.
Be a day.
Yeah. Which to me seems crazy. That there should be a minimum period of finishing. How long the finish is for me is always about kind of percentages. A 20-year-old with a 3-year or 5-year. If it's a 25-year-old whiskey, 20 years in bourbon, 5 years in something else. For me, I still feel that's a finish because the bulk of the time is in one cask. I know Stephen is very strong on the 3. That once it's hit 3 years in another cask, it's a double maturation because he feels that it's whiskey again in that cask, which makes sense. But for me, I fall on the kind of percentage terms.
No, there's nothing in the regulations that covers it. Basically, it's spending at least 3 years in wood. Now, the first year can be a bourbon, the second year in sherry, the third year in rioja, and it's still matured and it's still Scotch whiskey. It meets the requirements of the laws. There never has been any legislation or regulations covering finishes. Yes, we all know that Bill Lumsden he didn't get his knuckles wrapped, but there were certain mandarins within the SWA who didn't like the idea of finishes when it first started. They're all accepting it now, but certain whiskies wouldn't take a double maturation. Certain whiskies wouldn't take, for example, a cognac finish for 2 years. They might take 15 months or 18 months, but they wouldn't manage to survive after 2 years and keep the character of the whiskey.
Is there something that says like after so many years or so, like so what a percentage it's a double maturation rather than a finish, or is it literally just down to whatever the thing sounds better?
It's down to the distiller's choice of words in that, because there's nothing in the regulations that mentions double maturation.
We've seen marketing on triple maturation and stuff, and it could literally be 2 weeks in one cask, 2 weeks in another, but there's no actual distinction in the regulations. So, well, shall we? What's everybody's opinion on this then?
So before you jump in, can I just
sorry,
I missed a bit of that conversation because my headphones just died and I was waiting for my my laptop microphone to kick in there. Just to go back to John's comment, which I think is quite pertinent, that certain whiskies don't take to finishes and double maturations and things like that. There's an often used term within Scotch whisky, cliche, whatever you want to call it, but that cask is king, which is right to a certain extent. But I think the distillery and the stills themselves are kingmaker.
Yeah.
They decide what type of cask is actually going to work best with that spirit. They give it a direction. They give it a kind of a focal point that gives you the type of cask that's going to work best. And that might be a refill hogshead. Sometimes a refill hoggy can produce amazing, wonderful spirit. And then you get really intense, powerful casks that are good finishing casks, and they work really well with spirit. Our spirit is versatile. Our spirit of Glen Moray has got that opportunity and that avenue to go in different directions, and we embrace that. We absolutely go for that to the maximum. So we're doing something that not every distillery can do. It's not to say that you're going to love every whiskey. We have 20 odd different expressions at the moment. The most often asked question I get is, which is the best one? Well, to be honest, if we knew that, we would just make that one. We wouldn't make the other 19. We're producing for different tastes, and tonight is a great example of it. The thumbs up, thumbs down. That shows that some people are going to love it, some people are not going to like it, some people are going to be a bit meh about it. And if we get that for different people for different whiskies, we're doing our job absolutely right. The spirit is going into the right casks because we're suiting different tastes and different palates. That's what we're trying to do. Sorry, you can jump back in.
No, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that would be like saying, I don't know, a food company that's got no one item is going to meet everybody's needs, is it? And that's exactly the same with whiskey. Everybody's got their own sort of viewpoints on this and their own tastes. So it would be a very strange tasting if we all agreed absolutely on all of the lineup. I mean, that would be a very boring tasting for a start off.
May I just ask, Iain, do you ever, like, in the deepest, sort of darkest corners of your kind of soul, think maybe the Glen Moray range is too big?
You don't have to go into my deepest corners of my soul. It is too big.
Okay.
I've said for as long as, and we need a little bit more focus about what we do. I like it when we do. This is where hopefully marketing have switched off of the YouTube part of this clip, but they've heard me saying this often enough. But we need to focus on a core range, and kind of push maybe more into those kind of limited editions or small batch releases, whatever you want to call them, that do burn brightly, quickly, and disappear. The approach we take with the bottle your owns, so that we've got this core range, this kind of real spine to the team, and then stuff that makes it fun and funky for quick periods of time, disappears, we move on to the next thing. That one could have been your all-time favorite, but tough, we're on to the next thing. We're on to the next thing. We're on to the next thing. Just keep moving forward. I'd like us to take that approach. Don't get me wrong. I joined Glen Moray in 2005. For the first 5 years of my career there, I had the same 3 whiskies to work with. I don't want to go back to that. They were great whiskies, but talking about the same 3 whiskies every single time, over and over and over again, that gets to be a bit of a drag. Now it almost feels like we've got something new every week. So it's more exciting, it's more fun. I like working this way. Sometimes I've got notes. I'm sitting here, I'm dropping the notes, but I'm sitting here referring to notes because I'm losing track of sometimes of the whiskies that we have. So it's a different world, but this is a more fun. This keeps me on your toes, keeps me on my toes. And it keeps it interesting. We're always looking for something new to try, and certainly Glen Moray at the moment feels like we've always got something new to offer.
Iain, as following up on Ian's question, I used to tune into this Scottish guy, Aquavite. He runs his Thursday sessions, and one day I might get 10 out of 10 on his quiz, but I'm far down on that list. I think it was last week, there was a question about distillery increased capacity, and there was from 2.4 million to 8 point something, and which is this? And there was 3 distilleries there, and one of them were yours, and I knew the answer, so I got the point. But how do you cope with that increase? Can you share something about that?
Yeah, so our production capacity, so we went from 2.2 to 3.3 in 2012. That was in the grand scheme of things, that was a relatively easy expansion because that was just utilizing space available to us. So putting stills in the still house without having to build new buildings, that we had the room for a couple of extra stills. They just went into capacity, it was there. Then in 2016, we went from 3.3 to our current 6 million litres. That's where we are right now. I don't know if anybody knows my situation, but my wife and daughter and I were looking to move into Elgin, so we've sold our house in a little village outside Elgin. So I'm currently living at the distillery while we search for a house. So I'm sitting just almost like I could throw a stone and hit the still house from here. So as I sit here, just to my right, there's a building site to my right, which is where we are currently digging holes to increase the capacity of our gas supply so that we can take it from 6 to 8.5 million. On top of that, what we've had to add to what we do, we have added a new wash still. So we've gone from 3 wash stills to 4. We've got capacity in the spirit stills. So we've got 6 spirit stills. We don't need to add to them. We've resurrected the old mash tun. So we had an old mash tun that sat, that was out of use. Its last run was in December 2015. Its first run under the new capacity should be in late January 2024. So it's sat without working for the last 9 years, and it will come back to life. So we'll have 2 mash tuns, we'll have 4 wash stills. We added 6 washbacks. We went from 16 to 22 washbacks. So they're in place, they're working, they're good to go. So we've not got the still up and running, we've not got the new mash tun up and running, or the old new mash tun, which is rather confusing for everybody. But that'll be coming back. So that'll give us the capacity up to 8.5 million. That is Glen Moray at its absolute capacity. We can't get any bigger than that, or so they tell us.
Are you not concerned about overproduction? You know, the industry has been full of boom bust over the years. And since 2008, we have now got something like, I don't know, 110 million litres of alcohol more in production than we had in 2008. Add to that the expansion of malt whiskey. We've got, what is it, 60 whiskey distilleries in France. There are 32 whiskey distilleries in Tasmania. There are whiskey distilleries, you know, Pernod have just opened up or just released a Chinese restaurant, a Chinese whiskey. Diageo started building a Chinese whiskey distillery. So, and we're seeing growth in India, yes, not just in their own molasses-based whiskies, but in malt-based whiskies produced in India. So you have expanded from 2015 to, you know, under 20 years, you've gone up almost 3 times in size. And there is, yes, the whiskey market is continuing to grow, but
yeah, you know, there is a mood music of leveling off across the industry. I don't see a collapse. I do touch wood. I don't know. We can't tell the future, but I think we're past that boom and bust, or maybe kind of boom and leveling, and maybe a boom and slight drop. Maybe, I don't know. From our perspective, we need the stock. We're producing what we need. as a company. We're not a Diageo. We don't have another 16 other distilleries behind Glenmoray vying for space on shelves. We have Glenmoray plus our blends. This year, for the first time ever in the history of Glenmoray, we put all of our age products, and by all of our age products, that included our 12-year-old on allocation. So that meant that every market got their allocation. Once they'd sold out, it wasn't an eternal pond that they could come back fishing to. That was all they got for the year and no more. So we're short of stock. We're filling the gaps that we have as a business and as a company. So we're focused on what we're doing, what we are as a business. You know, okay, you maybe need to look at what's happening globally, but certainly from us, there's markets demanding, asking for our product and looking for our product. And we can't give it to them at the moment. But if it continues as it is, we'll be able to give it to them in the future.
Okay. It's just, you know, 1978, sorry, 79, Johnny Walker over budgeted by 1 million litres of alcohol. That's, you know, and everyone over budgeted in 79. That's why we had a whiskey law in 83. That's why some whiskies, a lot of whiskey distilleries were mothballed, some never to reopen again. And there is again, in the 70s, we saw huge growth. You know, on the back of the Second World War, we saw a huge growth. And the industry, yes, the first distillery wasn't built until 1956, but we saw huge growth and expansion, and things were going well. Then all of a sudden, and then we're in recession, and the UK is about to go into recession again. So we're. I'm still concerned that the expansion is possibly too large.
Yeah, I think we could say that across the board. To some extent, what extent that'll be, time will tell. But for me, I think we've positioned ourselves as a brand in a good place. You know, we haven't. The word premiumization has been bandied about Scotch single malt whiskey for as long as we haven't chased that. You know, we've carved out a niche for ourselves where our whiskey is, you know, we want to use the word affordable, but it's cheaper. It's cheaper than everybody else's, but the quality is still there. You know, I like to think, I hope we've showed that tonight. You know, I'd quite happily do a 40% tasting across our classic range and compare it against anybody else's. From a price perspective, it stands up every day. And I think as long as we continue down that track, there'll always be demand with volume for what we do. And we're not chasing the Macallans of the world. We're not chasing the Dalmores of the world. We're not trying to price ourselves to the point where only a select few of us can enjoy it. We're making whiskey that people can buy and drink. And as long as people are buying it and drinking it and not buying it and putting it in the cupboard to save it for that special occasion, or to flip on a secondary market that's getting killed by the brands themselves, then, you know, we're in a good place, and that's the place we are. So, you know, that side of the market, I think, may have challenges ahead. I hope, I could be wrong, but I hope we're not going to see those challenges. I think we're in a good place to face up to what comes with Scotch whisky. You know, making it affordable for people, and with that comes a level of brand loyalty, a level of brand forgiveness. You know, I started my career with Macallan. I've done both sides. And I remember when we launched Fine Oak at Macallan, the battering that the people at Macallan took for releasing a wonderful whiskey, but because it wasn't Macallan and Sherry, people were just determined to knock you. And the 15-year-old Fine Oak Macallan is a wonderful whiskey. I won't hear a bad word against it. Pricing, let's have a different conversation, but it's a great whiskey. Whereas we get away, we can make a little bit of a mistake and people are a little bit more forgiving because we're not pricing to the point where people are going crazy about it. So if we bring out a bottle your own that maybe doesn't hit the mark and it's there to soundboard with people, there's that level of forgiveness. People haven't laid out their their weekly rent or their monthly mortgage, whatever they're doing, to buy that bottle. So they'll come back to us. So I think we've kind of built that brand loyalty on that basis, and the quality's there to back it up as well, more consistently than not.
We see it in lots of we see it in lots of industries though, where there's winners and losers, even in recessionary periods. You know, like there will be winners and losers. So I think you're right. I think from a Glen Moray perspective, whatever happens in the market in general, there will be winners and losers. And I think, you know, if there is a downturn that affects Scotch whisky in particular, then, you know, I would say you're in a reasonable position to ride it out, even if it does turn nasty. And, you know, there are some potentials there for it to turn nasty. I think we've seen it in the secondary market, like you say. You know, it's incredible. Some of the bottles that you're now seeing on there, you would never have seen 6 months ago at the kind of money that they're now being traded at. So there's definitely something happening in the market. But yeah, anyway, shall we do the old thumbs up?
Have we really talked about this peated rioja? Or
yeah, I don't think we have. Well, I'll throw in my 2 penneth on this one. I struggle with rioja in whiskey, and this has kind of cemented my view on this. I'm not keen on it. Not specific. I think it's the rioja that's kind of, and actually it's still, I wouldn't kick it out of bed for farting, so to speak. But it's still a decent whiskey from a perspective of I would definitely not drink it, if you know what I mean. But it's not my favorite, not by a long chalk in tonight's lineup. But that's just my view. I'm curious to hear what other people think about it.
For me, it's very dry, which is I wouldn't say that about any of the other Glen Morays I've tasted tonight. It's very dry and on the mouth. Still like it, but it's my least favorite of the night, unfortunately.
Very unusual dram. Very unusual. For Glen Moray, it's nothing. There's no sweetness apart from the very, very beginning. Yeah, it just dries out. I wouldn't say no to another one, but no, it's not my favorite.
Yeah, I'm expecting this to be a bit of a room splitter. I think there's going to be some big fans of it, but
it's a bit drier than normal. But there's a meaty touch to the flavour. There's a touch of smokiness as well. Weirdly, once you add water, I would call it medium sweet. But it's a good richness in there, and there's a dark forest fruit character to it as well. So it's middle of the range for tonight, as far as I'm concerned.
Does anybody want to throw out a guess on the strength of this one?
Mid to high 50s.
Yeah, 57.2.
Oh, very specific.
I've got low 50s. Low 50s.
It's a bit quieter than cognac. A bit quieter than cognac.
Once you get past the smoke, there's a big hit of aniseed. That's what I'm getting. Right through to the finish.
I agree. I got this overriding flavour of licorice, I think, on the finish as well.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
I was pleased there was no sort of wine funkiness when I read the list.
So on the strength, Neil's just nicked it from Bobby as the closest. So it's 58.8, this one.
Ah,
wow.
And how much a bottle?
I actually don't know yet. I think it'll sit round about £80. I think. Don't quote me on that. Price has not been set for the UK as yet, as far as I'm aware. So
no, I think it should be about 50 quid.
I'll do a call.
With a discount.
They're just rooting in. Just ignore them.
We've not had the whiskey bust yet. Give it a few years. They come, then we can price it at that. You know, interestingly, you know, this is where, you know, it comes down to taste. I prefer the rioja to the cognac.
No.
You know, personally speaking, I love the rioja influence. I think the smokiness becomes a little bit dirtier in the rioja. I think it just gives it a bit more street smart. I think it's just something like filthy about the rioja, which I like, if that's the right phrase.
Must be. I'm the complete flip of that. I much prefer the cognac finish.
Yeah,
and
that's the feeling I was getting across the room. That's why I threw that out there.
I must admit, I'm lucky enough to actually have a sample of the rioja that's not the peated one from the other tasting.
Yes.
And I really prefer that to the peated rioja.
Oh.
I think the actual rioja finish is, the rioja maturation is much nicer than the peated rioja finish.
Adrian, you got to remember, you and I have a normal mind. Ian's got a dirty mind, he said. Just admitted it there.
Okay. I must admit, my personal choice, weirdly enough, is the port cask. And as I said, the rioja comes way down it. And what's his name? Who runs the Speyside Whisky Festival? Was it Glen Farclas?
Runs it?
Sorry?
Who runs it?
Who runs it?
George McNeil. He's Johnson's Billy Mill. He's the chief exec.
Angel's Nectar Whiskey. He was general manager at Glenmorangie for a number of years. Sorry, at Glen Farclas.
I can't think. Not Spirit Speyside.
I can't remember his name. Anyway, he produced an Isla Rioja aged its full life, and it was my whiskey of the year last year. Last year or the year before. Wonderful stuff. And I was hoping for good things for this one, but it's down in the middle. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I think you're being kind, John.
No, Bobby, leave him alone. If he's happy with it in the middle, let him.
No, it's in the middle.
He's only one person on this site older than me. Leave me alone. I'm picking on him.
Can I pick on somebody in terms of getting their feedback on this? I'm going to go with Stuart. Looks pensive. Stuart, what did you think of this?
Yeah, no, I really liked it. I do get the dryness from it, but I think it's really nice. It's quite light. I never would have guessed like the higher strength on it. So, yeah, I'd quite happily have it, buy it, drink it. I do prefer the cognac, I think, but like I wouldn't be upset having it for sure.
So is it pretty close to the cognac then? Is your cognac the finish? Is the cognac your favourite of the lineup?
Yeah, I think so. I think the cognac's just a bit more. I'm not like a huge peated person or anything, but it's definitely just got a much more punchier smoke to it. I kind of weirdly had it, and it reminded me of like an Ardmore, but a bit fruitier. Just when I had it, and I really like Ardmore, so that kind of won it. But yeah, I'd quite happily have or buy either, but I'd lean towards cognac if I had to choose one.
I mean, Ardmore is, it is one of those distilleries, I think, that doesn't get enough kind of what's the word? Shine the light upon, because it does do some great peated whiskey. But is that nice to hear, Ian, that that Glen Moray, one of your peated expressions is getting compared with the likes of Ardmore, who've been doing peated for a long time, and they are almost like the Speyside peated whiskey, isn't it? I mean, that is it. And you're in there with them, really, in my view. I love Ardmore, and they would quite happily stand up. Even dare I say, the rioja stands up as a nice peated number. Rioja isn't my thing, but I still it's still okay. But
here, in comparison to any successful, long-standing distillery in Scotland is not a bad thing. The distilleries have been around for a long time if they make good whiskey. It might not be the one to your taste, but it's, you know, anything with a long history and tradition of making whiskey, they're there for a reason. So you know, I'll never not take any comparison.
Do you find that you have a particular sort of near competitor, if you like, that you genuinely think, if it not Glenmoray obviously, but if you had to work somewhere else, or if you had to drink only their whiskey, what would be your sort of the distillery that you kind of look up to most in Speyside?
In Speyside, that's a great question. I think, you know, in Speyside, I love Balvenie. I love what Benromach are doing. The Benromach 15, I think it's phenomenal what they're putting out at the moment. They're 15-year-old, that slightly peated style. That's great. A little bit out of Speyside, but Glendronach is one of my all-time favourites. You know, I like a big sherried kind of creature. So anything there. As far to go back to the kind of point of comparison, I always remember when I first started spending time with Ed Dodson, who was our distillery manager before Graham joined us. Ed always compared and kind of pushed to be like Balvenie, and there was always a kind of similarity and a comparison there with Balvenie. Whether anybody sees that now or at the time, I don't know, but that was kind of what he kind of pegged Glenmoray alongside. For me, I always felt kind of had similarities, particularly in the lighter bourbon style with the kind of Glen Grant 18-year-old, or 18 and Glen Grant 18 has got a lot of similarities. So yeah, there's one or two, but it, you know, like we spoke about earlier about having a big range, you know, Iain asked, do a big range, which kind of means that you're trying to be all things to all people. And it kind of means that the distillery isn't quite as defined. So you can't quite peg it with somebody else, because that expression needs to be different from that expression. Otherwise your range is a homogeneous mass of same. So you're always trying to kind of push boundaries, break out of your style a little bit. So it's very difficult now to compare directly with one distillery, because we've expanded our range, but so has every other distillery. And we're all trying to do something that little bit different, a little bit quirkier, a little bit more unique. So sometimes difficult to directly compare and contrast. But yeah, great question. You know, I've got a lot of love for the guys down at Springbank. They've got a great ethos. It's not Speyside, I know, but their ethos of keeping everything local. I like the fact that the distillery is a part of the community. It doesn't matter whether you're marketing, sales, whatever. That is, you stay in Campbelltown and you are a part of the community. And I like to think that Moray, to some extent, okay, we're French owned and we've got a French head office, but the distillery is still part of the community. We try and do what we can from a community perspective, whether that be through sponsorship, support, welcoming people at the distillery. One thing that makes me immensely proud of Glenmoray is our coffee shop is full every afternoon of locals. It's people round about. It's people local to Glenmoray Distillery that come in to join us for coffee. And that's something I think I'm proud of, that we're trying to attract a local audience base as much as we're trying to be the international brand that the kind of bigger company look to be.
Well, to be fair, your coffee's quite nice.
Coffee is good. Coffee is very good.
So is your soup, your scones, your cake.
I know I'm going to have to start paying for coffee over the next 2 weeks. I can't go in and just switch on the coffee machine.
Yeah. Well,
switch on the coffee machine. They will call you then.
So, did we do the thumbs up, thumbs side? Oh, actually, we haven't on this final draft, because I'm expecting this to be a little bit more of a room splitter. So, shall we do the old thumbs up and stuff? So let's go. Let's see what. So I'm gonna go. Yeah.
It was, for me personally, it was just a bit too peaty.
Okay. Actually, not as much of a room splitter as that, because there's a more thumbs up there than I was expecting. There's a few sideways ones. Nobody's actually knocking. You know, like no one's actually thumbs down on this. So okay. Does anybody want to jump in with their view? Have we missed anybody? I try to kind of pick on everybody, but just in case I've missed anybody, anybody want to dive in with their view on this one and or any of the others?
It's the first one is the Glen Moray sweet, fruity spirit had disappeared. Even in the PX, we've not tried tonight, you still got a hint of it. I'm very surprised at the finish on it. Didn't suit me at all.
Okay. I get you, because I think you and me might be similar on that one. I just wasn't as much of a fan.
I'd like to say we're both young, Carol, but I could be probably lying now.
Older than you, Carl.
I'm young.
Thank you very much.
I was a bit surprised at some of the comments about the peated rioja. I kind of, as you know, I'm not a peated fan. I thought that was very good. I thought it was far more integrated. The nose, the palate, the finish were together, much more than the cognac, where I got different things at different times. As far as peated drams go, I thought that was excellent. And I was a bit surprised at the kind of the negativity. Obviously, everyone has their own palate, but that was the surprise dram for me. I knew a bit about the others who were there earlier this year. I thought that one, for a peated dram for me, that's as good a peated dram as I've had in a while.
Bloody hell, Becca, did we have that recorded?
Steve, I'm glad we got different palates, because we read peated on a bottle, you expect peat, and here I wouldn't get it. So the peated cognac, perfect, beautiful, but the peated rioja, no, not for me. It's not enough peat in there. But if you're looking at average, what you produce, Glen Moray, I mean, price-wise, nobody can beat you. So you're doing a good job there, but peated rioja, not for me. Not enough peat.
Jürgen, every time you find a dram you don't like, if you can drop me a message, and then I'll know to go and buy that.
I'll do that, Steve.
Yes, I would like to just say that, yeah, I thought that I was pleased the rioja didn't have any wine funk about it. It's a good dram. But yeah, as Jürgen says, when I started my whiskey journey, you're with the 3 bottles I could have at the same time. The classic Elgin range, that's how I started. And I have no hesitation in recommending just grab all the Glen Moray bottles you can get in the supermarket and start your whiskey journey.
Yeah.
It's a great way to start.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Robert Ransom. That's the fellow who was Angel's Nectar Whiskey. He was general manager of Glenfarclas, and for a while he was running the Spirit of Speyside Festival.
Yeah, you're going back a few years for Robert.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And he did this Isla Rioja aged, which was wonderful. It was obviously Kalila, but and it worked wonderfully.
I think one of the bottles I picked up, it came out roughly about the same time we were talking about releasing this, was the Lechig Rioja, which is doing the rounds just now at 46%. It's wonderfully well priced. It's beautiful. It's a great whiskey. And I was kind of quite excited by the direction we were taking with our Riojas when I tasted that. I thought it's going to be not similar, because their peats, their spirit's very different from ours. But I'm pleased with this one. I don't drink a lot of peated whiskey. It's not my go-to. So I'm maybe not, bizarrely being the man working for the company talking about it, I'm not the kind of font of knowledge with peat, because I don't have that broad spectrum of palate and tasting and experience with it. My whiskies that have been brought up and weaned on have been Speyside and Highland whiskies. But for me, I really like the Rioja. I think it works well. And as I said, I kind of got a vibe in the room that the cognac was superseding it. But for me, the Rioja won out. That's the one I would go for as a peated whiskey.
Well, like I said, or as you might have guessed, I'm a Speyside person as well, because, as I said, that's the 4th bottle of Twisted Vine I've bought since it was released.
Yeah.
for consumption.
Yeah. Well, and on that note, we have now finished all 6 of the lineup, despite getting the order slightly wrong, ever so slightly.
I'd expect nothing less.
What a cracking lineup it has been. And again, Iain, you know the score. You're welcome to stick around and enjoy the continued crack with us if you like. But we appreciate your time that you've spent with us and sharing some cracking whiskies. I'm hoping that we can get something organised in the not too distant future for a follow-up, because we're always keen to have you guys take part in a tasting with us. So thanks very much again, and thanks everybody for taking part. And yeah, I don't know what more to say really, other than what a cracking night. Thank you.